This is Paul Puddington, Lieutenant Paul Puddington.
Hi.
Childhood friend, still friend, big friend. Congratulations on the new baby.
Thanks.
We set it off air.
Yeah.
A lot going on for you.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, we got a full house now. There's a lot
3,
going
right?
on. Yeah.
3.
3, it starts to get away from you.
My wife is a champ. Yeah. So from like one of the early ones that I listened of your guys' podcast, I listened to a couple weeks ago. The thing that you said, I was like, oh my gosh, like you actually put into words what I was thinking is the thing that dictates, or when you know it's crazy, is the amount of time it takes you to get out of the house to do something. Like that is. Oh
and
my
the thought
gosh,
of having
man.
to do it all over again when you leave, the place you're going to.
Oh my goodness gracious.
That'll really now we're staying home.
Yep.
That'll really like get you to just stay home.
It is way easier to have people come over and hang out or even to like make food for people at our house.
Yeah,
than
it's
to,
worth it.
to go somewhere.
Yeah, I'd be like, I'll host and I'll make food. And you guys don't have to worry about it. Just come to my house.
Yeah.
It's so much easier.
Please, God, come to my house.
Yeah. But yeah, so we have a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and a 2-month-old now. So Eli is 4, Elias, and then Caleb is 2. Kid's a little wrecking ball. He's like me as a little kid. I don't know if you remember me.
I do, yeah.
Before. My dad said the other day, he's like, I was like, was I like Caleb? He's like, oh, you were exactly like Caleb. He's like, no. The kid wakes up in the morning, he's got 2 speeds, right? He's asleep or he's 110 miles an hour. Yeah. And when he's awake, you cannot have anything that's like within reach of him that you don't want touched. Buttons.
Oh yeah.
My dad was like the other day, he walked into his office when we got to the house. He's like, stapler, boom, boom, boom. He's just like hitting the stapler, pulling out all my dad's drawers, like, clearing artifacts off the shelf and stuff like that. It's like my papa's stuff that's been around, for 100 years or whatever.
Oh no.
And you just got to like put everything above him. But anyways, my dad was like, yeah, you were like that until like 7th grade. And then all of a sudden, like something like a switch got flipped. And all of a sudden you became like this smart, kind of respectful little kid.
And he was like, I don't know what we did different.
Oh man. Anyway, so Caleb is 2, and then PJ, Paul Jacob, not a junior, but Paul Jacob. We wanted to be able to call him PJ.
That's cool.
So you can mix it up a little bit. So he's 2 months old. He was born in December.
Wow. Big transition.
Yeah.
2 to 3, especially littles.
Yep. Yeah.
Especially little.
Yep.
Yeah.
The old man-to-man to zone kind of concept. So
Right.
Yeah.
We're in man-to-man right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're in. You're in like prevent defense.
Yeah.
You gotta be pretty much, yeah. It's like one person holds it down while the other person sleeps.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Take shifts.
Yep.
Kind of.
And so you're saying the Coast Guard gives you really good paternity leave, which is
Yes.
nice.
Yeah. It's
So
been
enjoying that.
awesome. Yeah.
And then we get civilian Paul Beard. So
Yeah, exactly.
Which
Yeah.
probably now you can just like have.
Yeah, well, because I'm not having to check in or anything. Even if I did, I'm not putting a uniform
Well, like, can you
on,
just like have
but-
beards nowadays? Is that allowed?
No, they've talked about it. They've talked about it a lot, and they used to be able to. Like up until probably like 25 years ago, you could have beards and everything. You can have mustaches now, but no beards. But they've talked about kind of bringing them back.
Yeah, you see a lot of mustaches.
Can you wait? You can't have a mustache like in the Coast Guard specifically.
No, you can.
You can.
You can't have a beard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to stay
Mustache
between the lips
good,
or something.
beard no good.
Is that how it works?
What's that?
Like, got to stay in like the lips.
It used to be, but they've extended it. It's like you can go like a quarter of an inch past the ends of your lip because it used to be like
So you don't
the
look like
end of your
Hitler.
lip, and you look like it was like a Hitler mustache. It just looked terrible. Yeah.
You get like the curly at the end. That'd be awesome.
That'd be gross.
That would be gross.
Yeah.
But nasty.
A lot of the times we'll do like, we'll do like patrol or not patrol, but like seasonal mustaches. A lot of guys have mustaches on the boat.
Okay.
But sometimes like when we're in the heat of like, so I'm on a buoy tender icebreaker now is what I do. I did law enforcement for the first 7 years in the Coast Guard. But then I got to go to the Great Lakes, and now I'm on a buoy tender icebreaker. So the busy times for buoys are in the fall and spring. So we usually have like a month and a half or something like that where it's just like, you're just hitting it super hard in and out the whole time. And a lot of times we'll grow like mustaches for that. Yeah.
Dude, let me pull this up. I've got a picture. See if I can get it hooked up. So how long have you been doing that?
Doing
on the Great Lakes?
A year and a half. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
You like it?
Oh yeah.
You said you did law enforcement for 7 years.
It's good. yeah, I don't know. Do you want? I don't know. I don't know how you guys want the conversation to go. Do you want me to like take you through the Coast Guard time? You want to work backwards? Like I'm gonna start with boottending icebreaking. I'm gonna talk law enforcement stuff first.
We did just ask you both, didn't we?
Start like when you hopped on the bus and went to the academy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you want to go?
No, let's go high school. Like when did you decide you wanted?
High school. Okay.
Like this was an option.
Dang, it's digging deep. All right.
We have you for 7 hours. I don't know if you know this or not.
Yeah,
I asked you earlier. You said you didn't have a
clock
time
is
limit.
definitely not right. So,
yeah, I purposely messed up the clock so you wouldn't know.
All right, so let's see here. So high school, I played football with Nick, right? And like Brock knows this. So the biggest thing, one of my biggest focuses in high school was football, right? And I wanted to play college football. You know, my pop was a college football coach. My dad was my high school football coach. So I wanted to play college either way. So, my dad told me about the Coast Guard Academy. I think when I was probably in 10th grade, he was like, you know, you could go, you're not going to be able to play at Navy or Army, you know, but you can go to the Coast Guard Academy. The Coast Guard has football. So that's kind of how I got, made aware of the Coast Guard Academy. You know, I didn't even really know it was a thing, but Dad told me about it. So I had started looking into it. And then when it got time to start putting in for, you know, colleges and stuff like that, all the schools that I was applying for was with the goal of being able to play football. So I applied to Geneva College in Pennsylvania, Wheaton in Illinois, and then the Coast Guard Academy. Those are the only 3 colleges that I applied to. And I'd visited all of them, and I'd like, met all the football coaches, right? And had some kind of interaction with the football coaches beforehand, had sent them like, you know, the YouTube videos that Brandon Rogie and I used with like his demo, or not demo, what's it called? Like,
yeah, like a demo reel.
Yeah,
like
but it was like
profile.
It was like a downloadable. He's like, you can get this software that creates the video, like the demo for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it would have like either like the overlay of like, because you hadn't actually paid for like the pro version, or like in the bottom or something
like the
that.
watermark.
Yeah, the watermark, exactly. So we had like
you sent out your watermarked highlights.
Watermark highlight reel, yeah. So like junior and senior year, after both those seasons, Brandon was like, you know, super helpful with that, and we just like, you know, pull all-nighters. Putting together the highlight reel, and like sending I think I might have sent a couple discs. Anyways,
back in the age of sending discs.
YouTube videos and stuff like that.
Disc.
And those are still on YouTube if you want to go back and watch Paul Puddington high school highlights.
I would love
Train
to.
running over the competition.
Hilarious, man. Every once in a while, I like reminisce and watch myself in high school, and then I'm like, it's not as satisfying.
I don't have to watch them. I can still see it in my head, like taking the ball and just hitting the line. Like I can still see it.
I have like vivid memories of a lot of things, but one of my vivid memories of you is Port Byron junior year.
Rainy, right?
Nope, not the rainy game. The second game that we played, the playoff game. I think it was the sunny game that we played there. But I have a vivid memory of you playing tight end and going out and doing like a 7-yard crossing route, and like looking up and just seeing you make like this
right
sweet
before
catch,
halftime.
like boom, like overhead, and then like taking off down the field. And I was like, holy crap! Like that was a sweet play.
That was
like
a design play to me.
Pitch and catch, and Nick
that
got
was
like 20
right
yards.
That was like right before
That
the end of the
was
first
sweet.
quarter or something, and your dad wanted to get a big chunk of yards.
Yeah,
I remember that too.
I have
Dallas
just
threw
a vivid,
dime
vivid
right over
memory of that.
Yeah, that was honestly like the throw was a dime. I remember it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyways, all right. So high school football. Wanted to play college football. Dad told me about the Coast Guard Academy. So I applied to all those schools. Ended up getting accepted to all those schools, but I had determined essentially that if I got accepted to the Coast Guard Academy, that's what I was going to do, you know, because it just made sense. The education isn't free per se. It's paid for, you know, by the American taxpayer. But it's not like I'm having to take out college loans and stuff, right? Yeah. Like it's education that's completely covered. You got guaranteed
commitment. Like a job after?
Yep. So it's 4 years of school. So it's a 4-year, you know, college program. You get a bachelor's degree in whatever the major is that you did. So mine was civil engineering. But then you got a 5-year commitment in the Coast Guard after that. So active duty commitment, and then a 3-year reserve commitment after that.
Okay.
So
4 college, 5 active, 3 reserve at least.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. But it just made sense because, you know, that was like you knew what you were going to be doing afterwards, you know, and all that.
Sure.
And plus, like, I come from a, you know, pretty long line of, it just made sense to go in the military, right? Like my dad's grandpa was in the Army. My pop flew PBYs in the Korean War in the Navy. Dad was in the Marines, you know, for 3-4 years of active duty there in the late 80s. And now I'm in the Coast Guard. So it's like, you know, fourth generation.
That's cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Military service. So if one of the kids goes in the Air Force, we hit all 5 branches, like in 5 generations, awesome. Which would be kind of cool.
That is.
I don't know if I'm going to tell one of them that or not.
I know, yeah.
I don't want to put the pressure on,
but
yeah.
You're like, man, Air Force is cool.
The Air Force is pretty,
for sure.
They've got it pretty good. So,
yeah, so you just have to tell them how cool pilots are.
Yeah. Get them some planes, like some toy planes.
Well,
Air
so
Force
actually,
is cool.
Subliminally.
Eli, like, I got to get Eli to. So we went and visited. Sorry, we're kind of jumping all over the place here, but we went and we got to see Pat and Whitney and the kids at the EAA Air Venture Air Show in Oshkosh, Wisconsin this past summer. Because Pat got, I think it might have been right after the podcast with you guys. You know, they bought the plane and everything, which you guys got to go for a plane ride. Super jealous. I'm gonna get on that thing at some point with him.
That's pretty awesome.
But did you guys get to take off and land at the farm too? Did you?
No, but they did have that cleared out. Like when we went around, it was cleared out, ready to land. Yeah. No, we were at Duflo's.
Okay, from Duflo. Okay.
Yep.
But anyways, we got to go see them, and Eli got to, like, you know, crawl in Pat's plane and all this stuff. And now, like, the kid is super smart, like dinosaurs, airplanes, and there's, like, you know, 1 or 2 other things that he knows a lot about. But you can point to, like, different parts of the airplane, and Eli's like, yeah, like, that's the cockpit. Those are the ailerons. That's the rudder. That's the elevator. Like, he knows all the different parts of the airplane. So, like, maybe Eli would be the
plane
pilot.
guy.
Yeah.
That's how Pat was when he was a kid.
Yep.
It was like, knew everything about him.
Yeah.
See, so that was one question we had about you, like in high school, going back, was like, did you already knew that you kind of wanted to be in military, or was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think I just kind of had a bent towards that. You know, anytime that I was playing as a little kid, you know, we moved to the house that my parents are in now when I was probably 7 years old, and there's the woods behind the house. Did you ever get up there with us
on the rocks?
Yeah, on the rocks. Yeah. So I had like bases back there and everything, right? Like there's like a little scout base that like overlooked the house and everything. Like I've always, my dad had made me like toy guns and stuff. He's got these wooden guns. He's still got these wooden guns that he brought for the kids. 2 of them are out at our house now, and a bunch of them are still my parents. But he had made like, first it was like a muzzleloader, a hunting rifle. It's actually got like a little bolt action thing and all this. So everything was like hunting related at first, but then he made a Tommy gun because he was like splitting wood one time, and it broke like a Tommy gun with like the handle. He's like, I'm gonna make this a Tommy gun. And then he made me a 50 cal, like out of 2x4s, like stacked together. And they were like cut out with like the handles and like a broomstick for like the barrel or whatever. Yeah. So we would like mount that on the playground in the backyard. Awesome. So anyways, I always just kind of had a bent towards that, you know, and with Dad having been a Marine and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of figuring more like
the path.
Yeah, but I was figuring more like that I'd try to go to the Marines or something, you know, kind of combat based and everything like that.
Interesting.
But then, you know, found out about the Coast Guard. And you realize the Coast Guard does law enforcement, right? So that was like the best of both worlds, is the fact that I can do, you know, military and law enforcement. And I can get to that in a little bit. We can talk about, you know, the Coast Guard law enforcement stuff that I did.
Do you remember Boy State, right?
Oh, yeah. You talked about that in one of your episodes.
Did I really?
It was actually Brock's, because Brock was talking about going to the police academy.
When I passed out.
And you were talking about, you were talking about
I couldn't hack it.
The Boy State time.
The first day in formation, I like hit the ground hard. I locked my knees and passed out. Yeah. It was so hot. Anyway, I was going to say, did that because that was ran by
Marines.
They brought in a couple Marine guys. Yep. Did that was that oh, this is they're yelling at me too much. Like, did that sway your opinion at all? No. So like after that, you would have still been like Marine Corps is the way to go.
Yeah.
So that would have been like 11th grade. So in 10th grade, your dad told you about the Coast Guard. So like when did you decide Coast Guard over Marine Corps? Because you got to start that. You said you started that process.
Yeah, well, I think it was probably getting. Well, I don't know if I ever really decided that. So
is it 10th grade that you start all that like profile stuff for the military academies? Like you got to start that stuff pretty early, don't you?
No, there's not like a profile or anything.
Oh, okay. I thought you got to start like planning for that like really early.
No.
Okay. So when did you start?
I put in for it the fall of our senior years when I did like got accepted to the Coast Guard Academy, decided to go that route, you know, thinking that I would want to do like law enforcement stuff. Okay. But even when I was there, I was like, man, like I can try to lateral over the Naval Academy and I can be a Navy SEAL still and stuff like that. Like I was thinking all these things, right? And just never really took that seriously. And I don't think maybe then I would have had the discipline to do it. I don't have the discipline to do that kind of thing now, like in hindsight, you know.
I don't know.
I think it would have been really hard to actually do something like that. Like, I don't know.
Okay. Do you, all right. Is that the thing? Okay. Do you look back and wish that you had?
Try to go to the Navy SEALs?
Some kind of special forces,
no, because like the thing that I've found, you know, just kind of the thread through our whole life, and I know that you guys know the same thing, is that God has been weaving, you know, the perfect path for us to follow the whole way. And maybe it's not as, you know, super cool or like spectacular as being a Navy SEAL or whatever would have been. Cool, but you can just see like all the things that I've tried to do and kind of where doors have been closed. Like it's just been God, you know, kind of guiding us through that thing. Like, you know, getting married, having kids, you know, trying to these different stages, trying to do different things. So I don't regret not, you know, trying to do that.
I didn't know anything about the Coast Guard like before knowing you and getting into that. But like, I honestly feel like the Coast Guard's like the coolest, like the boats that you get to go on. I think
that was the thing that ended up kind of maybe the more you look into it, the more you realize like how cool it is, I guess. Because, you know, my dad, for the whole time that he was in, not the case for Pop, right? Like Pop actually went to combat and flew in combat. But the whole time my dad was in the Marines, he just trained, right? He just trained the whole time. Your dad didn't have that experience. Your dad trained in combat and stuff like that. Like he operated. My dad never operated. And that was a big thing. So my dad, actually, back to your point, when dad was, or when in high school and making those decisions, dad was like, Paul, if you go in the Marine Corps, you're going to hate 70% of it and you're going to love 30% of it. If you join the Coast Guard, it's like, it'll at least be 50-50. Like you'll love 50% of it. And
like that is like that is exactly what your dad would say.
Yeah.
Like the most practical, like honest advice.
It was very practical. He's like, you're going to hate more than you love about the Marine Corps, and that will not be the case to the Coast Guard. And it hasn't been the case to the Coast Guard, which I'm really thankful for. But anyways, all right. So back on the timeline here, Academy, got accepted to there. I knew that if I got accepted there, that I was gonna go there. That was, you know, what I was gonna do. So went there. Got to play football for four years, you know, college football, D3 college football, but man, I wouldn't trade that for anything. You know, I ended up playing linebacker. And I got to start like my last 2 seasons and stuff like that. And we were never like super spectacular, but the defense was pretty good. You know, we had some guys on defense that were, just really good athletes and a lot of fun to play with and stuff.
Who was was it your roommate that was your buddy?
My buddy Kyle Wood. Yeah. Kyle's his brother played at the Naval Academy. He was a starting offensive tackle at the Naval Academy. Whoa. Yeah. And he's actually, so he was like 320 pounds at the time. Not Kyle, his brother, but now he's down to like, you know, 250 or whatever. He's the naval flight officer on, the equivalent of like what is it? It's the P-8 Poseidon, a sub hunter is what his brother Andrew is on now. But anyway, so Kyle, cool. Kyle was my buddy.
Yeah,
Kyle. He was the smaller of the two, the older brother, but the smaller of the two.
Huge still.
But Kyle's like 6'2", and he probably played at like 225 or something like that.
Some crazy genes.
Yeah.
What position did he play? Defense too?
No, we both played middle linebacker.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Kyle and I were both middle linebackers, and there's another buddy of ours, Corey, and we actually, so for the last 3 years, really from like our sophomore year on, because one of the guys that was a senior my sophomore year, he got a knee injury pretty bad. Oof. So from sophomore year on, it was Kyle, Corey, and myself. We would rotate through the middle linebacker spots, like almost every series. You 2 series on and a series off, and got to do that.
So that's in New London, Connecticut.
New London, Connecticut.
That's where the academy is for the Coast Guard.
Yep.
What does it take to be like a college athlete while doing something like the academy? Engineering? You were doing engineering?
I was doing civil engineering. The academies are very academically rigorous for sure. And then they're rigorous in a lot of other ways too. So, yes, what does it take to do both? It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
You know? So you have to wake up or when I was there anyways, you had to wake up at, 6 every morning. You had a formation at 6:20. Everyone went to breakfast together. There was like an hour of military training time from 7 to 8. The academic time was from 8 to 1600, 8 to 4 p.m. every day. The sports time was from 4 to 6 p.m., 1600, 1800 in the afternoon. And then you spent the whole evening after dinner doing homework. And, that was 5 days a week. And then Saturday mornings from 06 to 1200 was military time, and then the 1200 Saturday afternoons and through Sunday was kind of like the liberty time. There's like varying degrees of liberty that you get as you went older in class and stuff like that. But you're doing homework, that whole time, or playing games on Saturdays and stuff.
You said military time. What does that mean? Like drill and training?
Like training time and stuff like that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's so rigorous. It's what people don't understand. Especially, I can't imagine if you're going to like a prestigious school or like an academy or something that's like
academically.
You have to keep your grades up,
and
then to be a full-time athlete too. It's just
so many hours. Like Kyle played football and baseball. Like he played both.
Really?
Yeah, and then on top of that, he was a naval architecture, marine engineering was his major.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty intense. Yeah. So
I remember,
it was just a lot of time. Yeah.
I remember when we came and watched that game.
Yep.
It was so cool because like in the end zone, they have like all of you call them cadets.
Yep.
Or like in perfect uniform, and they've got like their jackets on and their hats, and they're cheering all these cool cheers. I'm like, this must feel like to go to like an Army game, like Army versus Navy.
Navy. Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like you don't get that atmosphere anywhere else.
No, I think like Army, Navy, I get the impression that maybe those students are a little more into it. A lot of the stuff at the Coast Guard Academy was like forced morale. Like the game is mandatory. No one else knows that.
It's smoke and mirrors.
But there was like a couple of games that are mandatory for the Corps cadets to go to or whatever. Yeah. So like when we play the Army Navy equivalent for D3 is Coast Guard Merchant Marine.
Okay.
So we play the Merchant Marine Academy, which is in Kings Point, New York. And they've actually so we used to play that game early in the season. They've moved that game to the end of the season now. So it's like usually on Veterans Day weekend in November.
So it's huge.
And it gets big. Like ESPN3 has picked it up the last several years.
Oh, cool.
And they broadcast on ESPN3. And then this next fall, which is super cool. Sorry, we're jumping all over the place here, but
no, we're doing right. We're doing it right.
Okay, good. So this next fall is going to be at Fenway.
No.
Yeah, they're playing the game.
Why didn't you do all the cool stuff when we leave college?
At Fenway.
Am I right? Doesn't it feel like that? Like
Fenway, right? That's where the Red Sox play in Boston.
Fenway Park. Yeah,
so they're doing the game at
Boston.
The green monster.
Yeah. That is insane.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh, I know they do all the cool stuff after we leave.
Right,
Yeah. Like when I left my baseball team, then like a couple years later they had like a media team and they were doing like all cool stuff. And I was like,
Yep. So they get to play at Fenway this next year, and it'll be like on Veterans Day weekend and stuff like that, which would be super cool.
So, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah,
that's a lot of pressure.
It'd be super cool.
You know they do a Spartan run in Fenway?
No.
Yeah.
I would love to do that.
That's wild.
One of the easy ones, yeah.
Yeah, the sprints, those are the only ones I do.
One of the easy ones, the easier courses.
I don't do the Corwin ones who's like doing 50Ks or whatever they are up a mountain.
Oh my gosh.
Brutal.
Okay, cool. So we're in college.
Yep.
And then football career was good?
It was good. Yeah. I mean, we were never more than 500. We probably had like a 5-5 year, one of them. But we were never like super good or anything like that. But it was just a blast. And the other thing is like, having gone through, how rigorous it was, like we were talking about, to, play football while also doing the academics. And these are guys like, when we first got there, so I graduated from high school and I left for the Coast Guard Academy 2 days later. Like we graduated on a Friday night and my parents and I drove down there the following Sunday and started. It was the following Monday was the reporting in day for the SWAB summer, like 8-week boot camp equivalent, leading into the academy. But when I first got there, it was like the Sunday night before, you meet up with like, they have like a short coaches time. And I remember meeting like on the back patio, and you don't know any of these guys at the time, right, that are going to be in your class that you're going to be playing football with and everything. Right. But the football coach at the time, saying like, just take a look around, these guys, you're going to spend just about every waking moment with these guys for the next 4 years. You're going to become best friends with them. And he just jumps right to it. It's like a life thing. It's like, these guys are going to be in your wedding someday. Like that's, and you're just like, you have no idea, at the time looking around, but like I have a memory of, just like a vague memory of seeing Kyle right at that meeting or whatever. Not really knowing who he was at the time, but then like Kyle was in my wedding. A bunch of other guys that weren't. There's other football players that like at my wedding and stuff too, but then other guys in the academy that you're just like super tight with, and then I'm still really tight with now and everything.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah.
There's so many cool. I was at that wedding.
You played guitar in that wedding. You did the music in our wedding. I was flipping through the wedding book last night with Caleb, like bedtime stories. Like, all right, man, you're not interested in any of these Dr. Seuss books. You want to look at mom and dad's like wedding photo book?
Does he think he was there?
No, I told
Rocky swears he was at our wedding. We watched the video. He's like, "Oh, I remember that." Like, no, you don't.
Yeah, dude, that was a good time. The cool thing about like military weddings is like there's so many more like traditions that you do, like
the sword arch and all that. Yeah,
like,
that's pretty cool.
That's cool stuff. Everybody's in like their sweet uniforms.
The whites,
yeah, dude, they're just sharp.
Yeah,
sharp. That's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's the bond that you would receive. Was it a big jump going from like small town Lewis County to like a big academy like that?
No. And the reason why is because it's a small school. Okay. And like, we were all super tight growing up. Like you kind of knew everyone. Like this is a small school too. And it was kind of easy, like kind of transitioning to something like that. For example, at Beaver River, I was able to do band, jazz, chorus, choraliers, like all that stuff. And I played football, played basketball for a while, indoor track, outdoor track, baseball. You got to do all these things that at a lot of other high schools, it's like you have your one thing that you do and you don't, I was in marching band, right? Like what football player is also in marching band? You could do that at Beaver River. Yeah. And it was kind of similar at the academy. Like it was small enough that there was multiple things you could do. Like I was in the Glee Club for a little while, but then it started conflict with football and I kind of I let the Glee Club go at that time.
Pick your priorities.
But you had to pick priorities a little more, but you still got to be kind of varied in what you could do. Yep. And it was kind of the same thing at the Coast Guard Academy. So, I say it wasn't a hard transition maybe in hindsight, but I mean, it was
culture shock.
It was a shock. Yeah. Certainly. I mean, just leaving home and getting into that. But the thing was like, it wasn't like you went somewhere and you were bored. You know what I mean? Like you were drinking through a fire hose right from the get go, with the swap summer stuff and then diving into the school year and all that. So they had this saying, that like, the days are long, the weeks are short, and the months are shorter. Like I remember being in class the fall of my freshman year and thinking like, this is never going to end. I'm never going to get to winter break, to go home and see friends at home and, hang out with my family and stuff like that. And like,
12, then your senior year, you're like,
well, no, 12 years later, it's like all of a sudden I'm sitting here with you guys. Like, I can't believe how fast the time is gone. But then like, I remember very specifically thinking that fall of my freshman year. And then like, I've kind of recalled that over the years as like time has just seemingly gone faster and faster, like it ended up it went so fast.
12 years.
Right. 2020. So this summer will be 13 years since I left for, the Coast Guard Academy. Will be this June, which is wild. A lot has happened between then and now, but yeah.
Yeah. So does it feel like a long time ago? Does it feel like talking about like swab summer in that first year? Does it feel like just forever ago? Is it weird talking about it or? Because like I want to hear about it, but you're right. It was so long ago.
Yeah. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. Like when you get with people that you went through it with and like reminiscing on like, stories and stuff like that. For example, you get out of swap summer and, freshman year and all you would talk about was like swap summer. You're just talking about the misery that everyone experienced together or whatever, kind of the shared experiences. But yeah, so swap summer was like, you got there, you did the big reporting in day where there's a bunch of admin and medical stuff and all that. And you get your uniforms, you get your head shaved, you learn how to march very briefly, march out on the parade field, you get sworn in, and then you get 10 minutes to say bye to your mom and dad. Like you find them in the crowd or whatever, and then you got to say bye to them, and then you form back up, and then it's like it's go time. Your parents leave, and you get marched back into the barracks. And
I don't want to interrupt, but I got so many questions.
Dude, start. Yeah.
Can you real quick, and then we can get right back into the story. I'm sorry, I got to know. Like, do you feel like can you share like what your dad said to you in that 10 minutes? Did he have like something? Because you only get 10 minutes. No, I got to know what Steve Puddington said.
No,
to you.
my
good luck.
So dad has always been. Well, you said like pretty practical, but he's had stuff that he had kind of come up with a theme for me for each year. I hope I can remember him right now because he's going to be disappointed.
I'm so glad I asked.
But my dad came up with a theme to encourage me in for each year that I was at the academy. So his I'm not going to remember his freshman theme now. It was do the best you can, I think was really his freshman thing. I'm going to start tearing up like thinking about this. Can't ask these questions.
Sorry, man.
No, it's okay. So I think his freshman year was do the best you can. And he was just like very encouraging. And I can't remember exactly what he said in those 10 minutes. I remember being choked up about it, and they had, the granola bar and like this is like the standard advice from have something for them to eat real quick, have something for them to drink. Oh, okay. Just like, because that's the last time that they'll get to have something kind of like that for a little bit. I think I have a picture of me with my parents right before they left and everything. And like, I got like watery eyes and everything. And I just looked miserable, and everyone else looked miserable too. Cause just getting thrown into it.
Super emotional moment.
But, yeah, I think we probably prayed together real quick, and then it's that part is a blur. That day is really a blur. Mm-hmm. I remember like snippets of it. I remember like staring out of the river on the back patio of the hall where like you checked in by company. So I remember checking in with my company and like going out there and then like telling us like stand in line, face the river, don't move, don't touch your face, all that kind of stuff. You're starting to do that.
When they do that, you're like, I have an itch on my
face. your face is twitching. I mean, you know that kind of similar experience. So we went and walked down the stairs. They loaded us on buses because they wanted it to be kind of like a boot camp bus experience. Uh-huh. And they just drive you in a loop just real quick around the academy. You go from the lower part where you checked in up to the barracks. And then that's where, so the way that they do it at the academies is the upperclassmen train the lower class. So what my freshman year as a swab, right, like checking in, there was the juniors were the ones doing like the drill instructor equivalent, yelling, training, all that stuff. So one of those guys hops on the bus and starts, somebody walks through first and everyone's like, what's going on? And then the other guy comes running up and he's yelling, you got 0.5 seconds to get off my bus. Go, go, go. They're yelling at you. Yes. You jump up, grab your bag, run out. And there's people, square this corner. You're like, what do you mean square the corner? And all this stuff. I mean, everyone knows because they've watched videos at that time or whatever. Like you kind of know what you're getting into a little bit. But they're yelling at you. You run into the quad, line up. You get whatever standard spiel these, now knowing now that these juniors have been practicing for the last 4 weeks or whatever, getting ready for this cadre training stuff.
Cadre, that's right.
Yeah. And then and then kind of dive into that, into the rest of that day, the reporting in day, our day, and then
do the videos do any justice to when like you're in the moment?
Yeah, a little bit. You flash back a little bit when you watch stuff like that. Yeah. But I got to do the cadre stuff though. So,
right.
2 years later, I'm in the position of being a junior and, getting to, I was the one that like went on the bus second. It was like, you got 5 seconds to get off my bus and all that stuff.
1, 2, 3.
So much fun, man.
Yeah.
Like that summer was exhausting for like the 3 or 4 weeks. It's probably 3 weeks that we did that. It was exhausting. Cause like you thought swab summer was exhausting. Well, as a cadre, you're up before the swabs and you're going to bed after the swabs and, you're having to do laundry and all that kind of stuff still. Like that was exhausting, but it was so much fun. Like doing the training stuff for the couple weeks with the new swabs and everything.
Did the like when you were first in the bus though, like your freshman year, and you had watched a couple of videos, like, oh, that's what it's gonna be like. How different was it from like being in the seat in the bus from like watching a YouTube video?
You can't. you can't, the moment, like actually being there is way different, right? Like it's actually happening to you at that time. So
it's not fun.
It's kind of a blur. Like I was saying, like that day is kind of a blur, but there's snippets that I remember very clearly. And like the bus ride, like I remember the bus ride and getting yelled at, the first time, like, waiting for the guy to come up the bus and like not moving and stuff like that. I remember that.
Yeah. For you, was it like, was it like scary, or was it like, I know what's going on? Like, how did you feel?
Yeah. Were you prepared?
It wasn't necessarily scary, but I've always been someone that like wants to do the right thing and like follow the rules and, kind of be the best I can be in whatever it was. Like I was really wanting to, I guess, impress for lack of a better term, like, just do the best that I could.
High in conscientiousness. That's what you are.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to put it. Yeah. Maybe sometimes a bit of a perfectionist.
Yeah.
So
when they're on the bus yelling at you, you're not like crapping your pants or
like I got this.
But it definitely triggers you. It wasn't like it wasn't like it was a pucker. Yeah, it wasn't. There was nothing about me that was like I got this.
Just staring at the back of the head
of the person in front of you. Go. Yeah,
mildly terrified.
I can tell you
mildly
exactly.
Terrified is good.
Yeah, mildly terrified. I can tell you exactly the brick location in the academy that I stared at for like 100 hours.
Yeah. Yep.
So nobody would look at me.
Yeah. So
you eyeballing me, son?
Yeah.
You eyeballing me, son? No, sir. See, I don't have like I was telling a couple episodes ago. I don't have experience in like law enforcement background, like or military before I went.
Right.
So like I had
and
no
a lot
idea.
Of guys did,
it hit me like I was like, but I'm the same way too. I'm like I'm on a stand out. And
right. So in hindsight, though, to like your point, like you realize now looking back at it more, like I think even as like a swab and then as a cadre, I was like, this isn't a game. Like this is this is real military training and everything has got a purpose and stuff like that. Right. But so much of like the yelling and all that stuff, it's just a mind. It's just a mind game,
which has a purpose.
It
at least for the law enforcement side. Too. Well, the military side, obviously
it does.
Like you need to be able to handle yourself under that pressure.
Stress, right?
Stress response.
Being able to create a stressful environment, and the other thing about stress is that it forces you to be cohesive with the people that you're going through it with and all that kind of stuff like that. That was really important. But I guess the part of it that's a mind game is like, in hindsight, you realize that none of those people that were yelling at you are actually jerks. Like he thought that they were. Like,
exactly.
They're all like super cool.
That's all the game.
People that are like, we're the same rank now in the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
And like, if you were to see him, somewhere that it's obviously first name basis and all that stuff. That hasn't been the case for a lot of people, like academy stuff. Like there's maybe, especially in the past, like more abusive kind of, definitely verbally abusive. And there's like, there's people that
hold grudges.
Hold grudges and stuff like that from, college or academy training time. Yeah. It's just like, you realize that person was 20 years old when they did that to you. Right. And yes, it was very immature, but it's not like who they are.
Yeah, it's okay now. You can get over it.
Yeah.
I really like what you said about the getting up before the cadets and going to bed after them. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, there's a metaphor in there. Like, you think you guys are the ones
getting, getting into leadership kind of stuff.
You guys are the ones getting the abuse and the intense training, but like they're up before you, they're down after you.
Yeah,
and like that's a really cool.
Yep.
It's a really cool metaphor there.
Yeah, for sure.
What an awesome system. So cool.
Yeah, I love those systems. They're so finely tuned and they run so well. Okay, so to finish out like the kind of the college portion, besides football, because if I was to ask you what your favorite part was, I'm sure football would be up there.
Yeah, I think football would.
Yeah. So what after that about the
academy?
Coast Guard Academy was like something you loved.
I mean, you guys probably remember this. So we. There's there's a cohesive aspect, right? Like making friends and stuff like that. But you guys probably remember I was only home for three weeks out of the summer during the summers that I was there because they have like training time during the summer. So the summers are really cool. At the Coast Guard Academy, you got to do time on a lot of kids don't like the Eagle, which is like the academy training ship. It's like it's a bark. It's a big sailing ship. It looks like a pirate ship, right? Like 3-masted, huge sails that they do. Yeah, you could look up a picture of it.
Do you mean they don't like it because it's like old?
It's old and it just gets a bad rap. Like you're all crammed in together. But it's one of those things. It's like it's kind of like the mob theory. Like one person doesn't like it, so like automatically like you're not cool if you think the eagle is cool. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if you think eagle is cool, then you're just like you're stupid or you're a hardo or you're buying into the system or whatever.
So you were a hardo.
I thought eagle was cool, man.
Yep.
Like I enjoyed learning all. Like you had to learn about the names of all the sails. Yeah, you got a picture of it. So the names of all the sails, all the lines that controlled everything on all the sails, all the pinrails where all those the lines and everything, the ropes were tied to. Yeah. Like you had to learn all that stuff, and it was really cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I have a picture of it. Yeah,
yeah.
So I'll overlay it 'cause for some reason I can't screen mirror to my.
Yeah. So anyways, so my what's called the third class year, my sophomore summer. So the summer after we did, swap summer. I did 5 weeks on the Eagle, and we got to sail from New London to St. Martin, right in the Caribbean.
Oh yeah,
the Windward Islands of the eastern.
That'd be
eastern
like
Caribbean.
St. Lucia, St. Vincent.
Yes. So like it's southeast of like the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. It's on what's called the Windward Islands.
Windward Islands.
Yeah, the far eastern part of the Caribbean.
Nice.
So we sailed there, and then from there we sailed to Aruba. So I got to go to Aruba for a couple days, spend some time in Aruba, and then we sailed from Aruba up to Guantanamo Bay. We were in Guantanamo Bay for a handful of days. Played golf in Gitmo. You guys will probably never be in Gitmo, but there's a golf course on the Navy base there.
Never say never.
It's a desert, man. So this golf course is hilarious. Actually, I have pictures of me and Kyle playing golf at this place, and it's the biggest iguanas you've ever seen. Iguanas like the size of alligators, like 4 or 5 foot iguanas. Jeez. But it's you tee off from the tee box or whatever. It's turf, and you tee off into the sand and the rocks and stuff, and then you drive your golf cart out there. You take your little square of turf from the back of your golf cart, you put it on the ground, put your ball on top of it, and then you hit off of that.
Every stroke's a 1-stroke penalty.
Yeah,
yeah, moving your ball.
Yeah, so that was fun. Did that. Got to see Guantanamo Bay, which is neat, and then we sailed up to St. Pete, Florida. And then in St. Pete, my sophomore year is halfway through the sophomore summer. I got off of Eagle in St. Pete and actually got to walk right down the pier to 110-foot, it was called Island Class Patrol cutter. So 110-foot patrol boat. And I was on that for 5 weeks. And I had asked, so at this point, like thinking forward, I knew that I wanted to do law enforcement in the Coast Guard, like when I eventually graduated and got into the Coast Guard. So I'd asked to be able to do something in the Florida Straits that was doing some kind of Coast Guard law enforcement. So I got on a 110-foot cutter in St. Pete, and all that boat did was, nope, that's a 210, 270 maybe. That's a bigger one. Google Island Class.
Island Class?
Island Class Coast Guard cutter, or 110-foot Coast Guard cutter. And so I did that for 5 or 6 weeks, and that was really cool. So we were doing, at that time, it was, we might not have time to get into all this stuff, but
That's sweet.
So
that kind of looks like the first one.
Yeah, I had no idea.
They all
actually, just testing you passed. If I would have tested Nick, he'd be like, "That's the same boat."
Nice try.
You can't get me.
Yeah,
dude, get into it, man.
So at that time,
we're here for it.
It was wet foot, dry foot was in effect. So that was a policy that was in effect from the Cold War era Cuba stuff, where basically, if Cuban migrants were able to make landfall in the U.S., they got to stay. Like automatically, you'd get like a little bit of money, and you'd actually get like some kind of legal status where you could like stay and work and stuff like that. So there's huge incentive for Cuban migrants to try to make landfall in the U.S. So the migrant interdiction mission between Cuba and the Florida Keys was huge. So all that 110-foot cutter did was, during its operational times, it would sail from St. Pete down to Key West, refuel, restock in Key West, and we'd go do migrant interdictions in the Florida Straits. So I did that for 6 weeks as a cadet. I got pepper sprayed. I remember we talked about your pepper spray story.
Dude,
and
brutal.
I got pepper sprayed in Key West. Thank God it was a cloudy day, but it was still like 100 degrees. And I got pepper sprayed in the switchgrass or the bluegrass or whatever that stuff is down there. It's like super just gnarly grass. Super hot, and it was just absolutely miserable. Don't need to get into that too much, but so anyways, I got pepper
watering.
sprayed. Oh yeah. Like
okay, wait. We have to get into it. Was it
about what?
Like, was it like OC spray?
Yeah.
Was it like? Yeah. And it did just boom, boom.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. OC. So it was. Yeah. So the way they did it is right. Like you get a little bit of training
hold
on
your
it.
eyes open?
No, they don't hold your eyes open. It's close your eyes. You know. Take a couple deep breaths, and then OC, open your eyes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this isn't so bad. Boom, right? Like it's like getting hit with, I think you described it like
burning shards of glass.
Burning shards of glass times 100, and yeah, it's just horrible. But anyways, then someone, so you got a gun belt with a non-gun, somebody comes at you with a pad, you got to fend them off, you know, keep your weapon back. You know, partner, I've been sprayed. Come help, partner, I've been sprayed. OC, I've been sprayed. You know, get back, all this stuff. Like you got to try to use the approved techniques that they taught you for 10 minutes before getting sprayed and everything. Keep the guy back, and then once the instructor is satisfied that you've sufficiently kind of held them off, protected your weapon, say draw down on them, you draw down your non-gun, get on the ground, and then you got to circle around behind them, break, and then your helper can come get you, and then
I couldn't do all that with a bad contact lens in.
You definitely take your
contact lenses out.
My eyes are burning. Oh, get this thing out of here.
Yeah, so that was pretty bad. Luckily, so I don't know if anyone told you this. I don't remember.
You've ever endured?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Isn't that something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But like I was able to pick the crystals out of my eyelashes. Like afterwards, like right after it, you do a bunch of water, try not to get it on the rest of your body. You do a bunch of water, and then you're just like, I remember standing with my face in the fan in the base Key West gym for like 2 or 3 hours after that. There's like people coming in and out. They're working out, but I'm like,
don't even care about that.
Just like, I got a picture of me somewhere, like holding my eyes open, letting it dry. And then I was able to like pick the crystals out of my eyelashes.
Smart.
So that when I went to wash later,
they would come off.
I had the crystals out of my eyelashes still. And like I try to, keep the rest of my, we don't need to talk about the rest of our body that you don't want to get it on. But I was able to minimize the reflash by, having taken the crystals off and like kind of brush your face a little bit and try to get like some of that stuff off.
Smart.
They tell you not to like shave that morning and stuff like that. So,
so your pores
got like little cuts and whatnot on your face.
Did you guys train right before? So was it another cadet that sprayed you, or was it an instructor?
No, it was the guy that was the law enforcement instructor on the cutter that I was on. Yeah, and all the crews that were watching everything. It's kind of like a rite of passage thing. In the Coast Guard
for sure.
A little bit.
Yeah, tasing was the same way. Like everybody's in the room watching you.
Right.
Yes, OC spray, dude. The only thing that we did before that, because for whatever reason we sprayed each other. I mean, obviously there was an instructor behind the guy and an instructor with the guy getting sprayed.
Right.
But like that way we knew how to administer it too. Right. And so did I tell this story when we were before about when we were all lined up and we had like our partner across from us and he had like the inert. You were supposed to have like inert.
Yep.
And he's like, "No, make sure yours doesn't have a red cap." And he's pointing right at me and I see a red cap. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Am I about to get sprayed? I probably would have gotten off easy, and then you're gonna miss, and I would have been like, "I'm done. Yep. I'm done." Yeah, I was like, "That's red, red." That's funny. Anyway, dude,
that's hilarious.
Insane.
Did you have to go through the tase too, or
no? The Coast Guard doesn't carry tasers. Okay. Water and tasers doesn't go together well.
That's a good point.
We don't carry tasers. There's other, other Marine units and stuff. Like obviously, like probably your police Marine units, and I think AMO, so Customs and Border Protection, Air and Marine Operations. We work with them extensively in Florida. So that's kind of like the Border Patrol equivalent of, it's the same kind of sub branch, but Air and Marine Operations, I think they carry tasers and stuff. But the Coast Guard we don't.
Yeah. Salt water and electricity don't go well together, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So can I get a good question? So you guys are running around trying to catch these guys, these Cubans.
Right.
But if they make it, job well done, like for them. Like,
what
a weird.
It was weird. It's gone actually now. The wet foot, dry foot thing. There's been kind of various stages of incentive and stuff like that for, we could talk about mass maritime migration for hours, I'm sure. Anyways, yeah, there's been like various stages of kind of incentives and stuff like that, but that incentive actually went away. It was kind of a weird thing. It was Obama's last day in office. It was one of those last minute presidential things that Obama did where like all of a sudden he canceled wet foot, dry foot. And I'm not sure why that didn't get done beforehand. I'm sure there was like some kind of political motivation for that. I'm not really sure what that was, but it was his last day in office and wet foot, dry foot went away. So this was 2017, right? Like right before Trump's first term. Yeah. And it was like overnight, dude, Cuban migration dries up like that. Like there's all of a sudden there's like 10% of the Cubans trying to make it illegally across the Florida Straits.
Just from a policy change.
From a policy change.
Like a piece of paper. Like an executive order.
Like you make landfall, it's no longer guaranteed you get to stay in the U.S. Like you're gonna get detained, processed, and eventually deported.
So like the incentive's gone. Like the risk reward doesn't calculate. So they just
didn't calculate anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, which we're jumping all over the place here, but we can get into that more. Like the perception. I'm not minimizing in any way conditions in Cuba or Haiti. They are like, it almost makes you cry thinking about it, especially Haiti, because I did Coast Guard career, right? I did cadet, national security cutter, did counter drug stuff, which we can get into a little bit. Did a 87-foot patrol boat in Florida Straits, more migrant interdiction, and then I did a staff job for 3 years. So our last 3 years in Miami was doing a staff job in the enforcement division in Coast Guard District 7 in Miami. Okay. So during the time that I was there, was the most recent kind of occurrence of being on the cusp of illegal mass migration that the U.S. has had in recent years. And the combination of just horrendous conditions in Haiti. So there was the president had gotten assassinated. I don't know if you guys remember that about 4 years ago. There was an earthquake in Haiti at the time. Conditions in Cuba have always just been, like really bad. So there's the push factors there, but then the perceived, like whether or not, depending on who you talk to, immigration policy actually changed with Biden in office or not, that doesn't matter. The perception is what matters, right? Sure, yeah. So the perception was that the U.S. is going to be more lenient towards people that are trying to immigrate legally or illegally, whatever, into the U.S. Whether or not policy actually changed or is just like enforcement change and stuff like that is really more of an enforcement stance. But Biden gets into office, assassination of the president in Haiti, earthquakes, and all of a sudden it's like the floodgates are getting ready to open again from Haiti and Cuba. And it got really, really hot for about a year and a half when I was at District 7 enforcement.
That's in Miami.
In Miami with attempted illegal maritime migration from Haiti and Cuba to the U.S. So it'd be cool if we could like look at a map of like the Caribbean, southeastern U.S. I could kind of show all this stuff. You don't have to try to pull it if you don't want. I can try to describe it. But basically across the Florida Straits, right, you have people that are coming in what we call chugs from Cuba. So this is what I was doing. Try to loop these things together. So my sophomore year, when I'm in St. Pete, Florida, on this 110-foot cutter for 6 weeks or whatever doing training, we're trying to interdict people coming from Cuba on these just ridiculously poorly made, like homemade rafts, trying to make it the 90 miles from Cuba across to Key West or hitting somewhere in the Florida Keys, because if they made it at the time, then they would get to stay. So there was that, and then people would try to come from Haiti in what are called sail freighters, what we call them kind of colloquially sail freighters, which are anywhere from 60 to 150, 200, probably anywhere from 60 to 150 foot sailboats, like wooden sailboats. The Cuban chugs, for the most part, like 15 to 20 people. These Haitian sail freighters, the most that I ever saw on one of them, like numbers wise that were interdicted, was like 250 people on like a 125-foot boat. Whoa. You have no idea like how dangerous that is, right? Like this is more than like an enforcement mission. Like, like the enforcement and like the border security stuff was really important, and that's what we were trying to do. But more than that, it was a humanitarian. Like you gotta know when these people are trying to leave, because you got to get a boat to them ASAP, because if they capsize, all those people are drowning. And there is like unknown numbers of attempted migration ventures that have capsized where, all these people have drowned and we have no idea like how many have actually, you never hear about it. And it hasn't really been, it wasn't really in the news too much, the last couple of years when that was really, really hot. But the numbers just absolutely spiked for a couple of years when I was there. And they were pulling a lot of assets down to kind of address all that, the increased flow and whatnot. And that was a very, like I wasn't even like on cutters at the time, right? Like I'm like doing all the coordination from like the from a staff perspective, but I was still like taking duty calls and whatnot. And we were actually like fairly tactical. We probably shouldn't have been at the level that we were at, like at a district, underneath the district, there's like sectors, and then the sectors have like the boats that are actually doing the interdictions. Like theoretically, we're more like logistics and strategic, but we ended up being very tactical. And a lot of that is because I think like, cuttermen, guys that have worked on cutters in the past, all the captains that are there and whatnot, like they want to be in the action. You know what I mean? It's like we just ended up being very tactical. And so we had like a duty rotation where you're taking calls. And I kid you not, like, the most stressful time that I've had in the Coast Guard was supposed to be a staff job in District 7, where you would be on duty for a week at a time. And when it was super hot with the immigration stuff, but then also taking drug cases in like the Caribbean and stuff like that, like calls for that and the coordination for all that stuff, you would get no less than 200 calls a week, from the watch floor and stuff like that. And, sometimes when you had cases, it'd be like 15 calls a night, like you didn't sleep. Wow. The nights that you're on duty and stuff like that. It was way worse than having an infant. Yeah.
So did you get what you asked for when it came to desiring a law enforcement career? Or like, what was it like? Were you like, man, this is not what I expected it to be? Or was it like, were you like, cause you're saying that's the staff job versus when you were out in the action, like, so, is the action more what you had in mind? Yeah.
So getting into like the actual, what I've actually done, let's see here. Let's backtrack again. Cadet summers, right? Did all the cadet summer stuff and just skipped to graduation. Graduated, commissioned. So now in 01, ensign in the Coast Guard. Went to the cutter Stratton, which was a national security cutter in Alameda, California. 418-foot cutter. Relatively state of the art, like the newest, the newest big cutter that the Coast Guard has. And they've got like a bunch of cool like, kind of intel collection capability, integration with the Navy and stuff like that. So when I was in California for my first tour, this is getting into the time, I was like, all right, cool. Like, it's go time for me to do like high speed, low drag, Coast Guard, law enforcement stuff. So we did a lot of patrols from there down to the East Pacific, which is off of the coast of South and Central America. And there is a huge flow of cocaine that comes from South America via boat, like smaller boats, 30, 40 foot, what we call go fast boats. And they're trying to make it from like Colombia and Ecuador out into the East Pacific near the Galapagos Islands. And they're trying to go, it's usually like 1,000, 1,500 mile trip, but they have like, anywhere from 600 to 1,500 kilograms of cocaine. And they're trying to hit southern Mexico. And then when it gets to southern Mexico, it gets broken into smaller chunks, and then it goes into containers, it goes to coyotes, it goes to boats again, it goes into sailboats. It all gets kind of broken into smaller amounts and then smuggled across the border into the U.S. and Canada and all that. So what I was doing when I was on Stratton was kind of the first line of defense against this narcotics flow. You're trying to hit like the bulk flow from South America to Mexico. So the interdictions that we were doing were, pretty cool. You're 500, 800 miles offshore, well into international waters. And there's just a whole slew of interagency partners that are working to, combat, the flow of narcotics at like this kind of primary vector. So there's actually DOD involvement, from aircraft, like surveillance aircraft. There's Coast Guard aircraft that fly for it. There's Customs and Border Protection aircraft that fly for it. And they're all trying to find these guys. A lot of it's intel driven too. And basically you find these boats that are trying to make these runs, and there's a bunch of Coast Guard cutters down there that are chasing around and trying to essentially like like catch as much as you can. So I got to do a lot. And actually what I was talking about with the video earlier is like somewhere, if I like look for this, there's a video on the internet of like my GoPro footage of me like in the middle of the night jumping off of a Coast Guard, pursuit boat onto a Go Fast, putting a guy in handcuffs and stuff like that.
What? And that's on YouTube?
It's somewhere on the internet. Yeah. I don't know if it's on YouTube. I'd have to find it. But if you like Google like Coast Guard drug interdictions, like you see, there's videos of guys. There's one that was really famous probably 4 or 5 years ago of one of the semi-submersibles that are usually loaded with like, 3,000, 4,000 keys of cocaine. And there was a guy that I graduated with. This is the guy that's like yelling at him in like broken Spanish to like stop and everything. And that was like on, all the big news sources and whatnot. Wow. But anyway, so like that kind of, scratched the itch of like the high speed law enforcement stuff, for the 2 years that I did that. And then we got to do a couple of Alaska patrols too, which is also really neat, getting up to Alaska in that boat. We did some like fisheries law enforcement stuff, and then some other national security missions, which I won't get into too much, but proximity to Russia and whatnot, we're kind of doing like.
Is that because it's classified?
There's classified stuff that they do. I was never really too privy to it, but like I said, there's like a lot of integration that, those ships can have with like Navy and kind of bigger picture national security interests and whatnot. So like the Arctic is a big thing for like national security stuff, especially nowadays, and the proximity to Russia. So those boats are like involved in that. And you'll see, like, you can look this up on the news, Coast Guard District 17 is all of Alaska, and the D-17 Admiral is always talking about like, Russian fishing vessels and Chinese fishing vessels getting to the U.S. exclusive economic zone, and the Coast Guard having to chase them off, and like, Russian warships and Russian planes and U.S. airspace, and all this stuff is happening in.
So I got a question.
In Alaska all the time.
Okay, I was going to ask. Do you remember a few months ago when like that video went around of the American pilots interacting with a Russian pilot that had come into American airspace?
I don't know if I remember the one recently, but it happens. It happens all the time.
Because they made it seem like, whoa, this is a big deal. Like, Russia's
in the news.
There's varying levels of like, like it probably will happen. Like there's a bunch of occurrences, and then there's a gap, and then it'll happen again or something. But it's all a political kind of, power game of
information.
Hey, it's been a while since we've flown over there. Go do that.
Freedom of the air, like flying other countries' airspace, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it's all kind of a gray area. Or is it just kind of like pushing buttons?
Pushing buttons.
It's pushing buttons.
Like.
Yeah, okay.
So some of it is gray area. A lot of what the Coast Guard does, freedom of navigation-wise, is gray area. Well, it's not really gray area.
Like international waters.
It's black and white to us, and it's black and white to China, right? Like, so China builds all these islands on reefs and stuff in the South China Sea, and they say, this is now Chinese sovereign territory. So, China's territorial seas extends out to like, this ridiculous section of the South China Sea. And the U.S. is like, negative, right? Like, we're going to sail, 1,000 yards from your little fake island that you've made and show that this is international waters. You can't just like create land and,
extend your border.
Yeah, extend your border and territory seas and stuff like that. So there's Coast Guard cutters that do that a lot. The Navy does that a little bit, but I think the Coast Guard does it because it's like, it's less aggressive having a big white boat that's like, so back to your point about the Coast Guard, primary humanitarian service, like there's so much more than just like a defense mission that the Coast Guard does, which is really attractive about the Coast Guard for me. But anyways, having them do like freedom of navigation stuff is much less aggressive.
Yeah, than a battleship.
Yeah, than a gray,
gigantic, gray, daunting behemoth of a ship.
Because the Bering Strait's like, 50 miles? Like between Alaska
at the closest point, Alaska and Russia. Yeah, it's very close. Yep. Yeah.
People don't know that.
No, they don't.
No, yeah.
It's because the map doesn't show
the map doesn't show. The map flattens it. Or up there, it gets like, it's close.
Pretty close.
Yeah. So, but so when I was on the National Security Cutter, we got to go up there and do some pretty cool stuff. Actually got like north of Alaska, like into the Arctic Ocean. Like we were north of Alaska.
Whoa.
And got over like the border with Canada and stuff like that. It was pretty cold. We actually almost got stuck behind some ice when we were there. We had to like pick our way through some ice to get back down, which is kind of fun. Not an icebreaker, by the way. You're not supposed to hit ice with that thing. Yeah, so we had to like, pick our way through that.
What would have happened if your efforts were unsuccessful?
You ever seen?
We were to figure something out.
What's the book? No, Shackleton's Journey or Endurance.
They all died.
Shackleton,
Did they all die?
We studied.
No, they all made it.
Oh, there was one but they all died.
Well, no, they were chopping off fingers and stuff.
I don't know.
Well, that's
probably a lot of them where they all died.
yeah,
But
yeah, probably most.
But Shackleton, they all made it. That is an incredible story.
Yeah, that's
basically you guys.
Yeah. What's that?
It's basically you guys.
No, not at all. Shackleton did that on a
first,
wooden
folks.
sailing ship, and then like his guys, like they took like 5 or 6 guys and hiked over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of Antarctic ice, dragging a boat across the ice. Launched the boat, somehow got to the nearest whaling island that was like another hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away. Landed on that island, climbed over the mountain of the island to the whaling town, and then they're like, hey, a year ago, we got stuck in the ice, and theoretically, all of my guys are still stuck on the ice down in Antarctica somewhere, and they were able to go and rescue them all. Like that's the
incredible.
It's just absolutely incredible. That is nothing.
Isn't
like
was the boat's name Endurance?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
If
I remember correctly.
Plus, like hypothermia and what is it when your hands
frostbite,
all
that stuff.
Like, dude,
Well, is there a sense of urgency in that situation, or was it like
there was? Yeah, because we had
limited resources.
So like we'd be watching the ice every day, like National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA). Like they have satellites for weather and all that kind of stuff, and they track the ice. And they're like, hey, like here's the ice forecast for today, or here's where the ice flow is at. And we were like actually at the time, Crystal Serenity. It was a cruise ship that was doing the first trip, passenger cruise ship for hire from Seattle through the Northwest Passage, right, like north of Alaska, through the Arctic Ocean over to Boston. This is in 2016, the fall of 2016. So we actually we actually followed the Crystal Serenity at like 100 nautical miles so that they didn't know. They knew we were there, but we weren't trying to like set a precedent of like, every commercial cruise ship that's going to try to do this trip gets a Coast Guard escort. But we were like, this is the first boat for hire that's trying to do this. So we wanted to be able to respond in a timely manner if something went sideways. So we kind of tailed them. And then that's why we were north of Canada. We tailed them all the way to the US-Canadian border, north of Alaska. And then we kind of handed it off to the Canadian Coast Guard at that time. And that's when we turned around and were like, oh crap, like the ice flow has come down. And then we had to pick our way back through to get back into like the Bering Straits and the Bering Straits and the, where do they do deadliest catch? Gulf of Alaska is south. Is it
the Bering Sea?
Is the Bering Sea? Yeah, back into the Bering Sea, and then through the Aleutian Islands into the Gulf of Alaska and home.
Whoa!
So yeah, I've been to Dutch Harbor. If you guys ever see deadliest catch, I've been to Dutch Harbor a couple times.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. Getting
They
to go
probably.
up there.
I'm sure the Coast Guard's been highlighted on that show before.
Oh yeah,
many times.
So when we were there, we did the second time that we did Alaska Patrol. That was more for like that wasn't for national security stuff as much as like the cutter that was supposed to be up there broke. And so we got my last patrol on Stratton. It was like we were in the East Pacific. I was like, this is my last chance to get some major drug busts and stuff like that. So we were all stoked about that. We're down in the East Pacific. And then we were chasing after a go fast and we were heading south. And then all of a sudden I walk into the combat information center and all of a sudden we're like driving north at like 25 knots. And I'm like, why are we going north? I asked my buddy, I'm like, why are we going north? He's like, I'm not supposed to tell you this right now, but we're going to Alaska. And I was like, what? we're getting diverted 2,000 miles north to Alaska. Because the cutter that was up there at the time broke really bad. And there's a coverage requirement in Alaska for things like search and rescue, fisheries enforcement, stuff with Russia, if there's Russian incursion and stuff like that.
So there had to be like, you mean you had to be a presence there?
We had to have a Coast Guard presence there, yeah. And we were the one that made the most sense. So we got diverted from our, high speed Coast Guard law enforcement, counter drug patrol up to Alaska.
Totally different.
To do that. Yeah, totally different.
And like, does all the crew know that, or are they just kind of like, all right, we're turning around?
We found out. We found out. Yeah, we had a big meeting on the mess deck, and the CO was like, "So
we're going to Alaska."
Pretty much,
Buckle
yeah.
up.
And I remember having a bad attitude about that at the time, but really kind of learning from that in hindsight. Like, it was actually really cool getting to go to Alaska again. And it's just, if you've never been there before, it is absolutely gorgeous. Like, highly recommend getting to Alaska at some point for everyone. Like, it is just absolutely beautiful. Definitely would like to get back there at some point. So
the deadliest catch. Why did I always used to think that was like off New England somewhere?
I don't know.
It's off the West Coast.
It's in Alaska. Yeah. So a lot of those boats in the wintertime, they come down to Seattle and they get a bunch of work done in Seattle, like at dry docks and stuff in Seattle. A lot of the crews, I think, are like Seattle based.
Dude, those guys are nuts.
Washington based. Oh yeah.
They're crazy.
They seem a little like I'm not surprised that the Coast Guard's been on the show. Like they seem a little.
Well, so when we were there, right?
The
second time, especially, we had a MH-65 Dolphins, a helicopter that was with us for the patrol, and is for search and rescue purposes, right? Like these fishing boats all the time will have guys get injured. They'll have guys overdose on some kind of drug. Whatever the case is, and they're 800 miles offshore, and you need to have like a presence to be able to get them medevaced off in a timely manner. So we did like several of those.
Yeah, the show makes it sound like they're never out in like good conditions at all, too. Or is that just how it is?
It's
out there?
Rarely good conditions.
Is that how it is?
Yeah.
So like what you guys would have been sailing through is kind of like that too, or
we saw some gnarly, some pretty gnarly stuff. Yeah. Now, granted, we're on like a much bigger boat than what those guys are on.
Effect on it. Do people get seasick a lot?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You remember what Elliot was talking about in his episode? The reason I remember this so well is because I just listened to it. Yeah. They were, so where Elliot was actually fishing with those guys off of El Salvador or whatever Central American country that was. Like that's like, if you go 600 miles further west, that's where we were patrolling during like the counter drug patrols in the central Pacific or the East Pacific and stuff like that. But so anyways, he was talking about like Tyler's there getting like seasick or whatever. Like there's a lot of people that would get seasick.
So even in the Coast Guard, everyone's getting seasick. You don't like getting used to that?
You do after a while, yeah. So my wife, Meredith was in the Coast Guard as well. We both went to the Coast Guard Academy. So that's where we met and everything. And she was on the Polar Star, which is a icebreaker. And she got to go to Antarctica twice on that. Yeah. So she actually has been to McMurdo Station and stuff like that. Yeah.
McMurdo?
McMurdo, yeah. But the shape of the icebreaking hull is like a football, right? So in order to be able to more efficiently break the ice.
Three-dimensionally break the ice.
Yeah. It's like, it's, rounded in the front and like rounded in the back. But like when it's in open water, the analogy is it's like a football in a bathtub, right? It's just it's not, it's so bad. And Mare, when they got underway, she would be seasick for a week. She'd just be puking for a week, absolutely miserable, and then your body would like adjust to it, and she'd be fine for the rest of.
Do they let you like take any medicine for that?
Yeah, there's like patches, and you can all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So. Yeah, I've never I've never understood motion sickness. I've never experienced it. I remember like in 8th grade, we went on like the Uncle Sam boat tour for school, and like everyone around me was throwing up over the side of the boat, and I was like, "What's the matter with you guys? Like, try to have some fun."
It affects different people different ways, but I've definitely
sounds terrible.
Usually, it affects different people differently. I've thrown up once, but I think I also had like a bit of a stomach bug when I actually puked. But my seasickness is like I just get a wicked headache and get super tired and fatigued. Yeah, it's But I usually don't throw up. But
so there's always it's like you have to adjust again. If you take a break from it, then you go back out and you have to adjust again. Or do you kind of get used to it?
You kind of get used to it over
for the long term.
Yeah. But
I would imagine that would be a pretty big problem logistically. Like if your entire staff is constantly getting seasick, like do they make them how do they handle that? Do you have to work through it?
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah.
Whoa, that sounds brutal.
Yeah, it sucks.
Okay, so I wanted to get your just kind of your career timeline, kind of just so we can have it on record.
A little more. Yep.
Okay, so you got the graduated from the academy. What degree?
Yep. All right. So I graduated from the Coast Guard Academy in 2016.
Yeah.
The great class of 2016. Shout out.
2016ers
listening to this podcast. I'm guaranteed I'll be the only one. Well, my wife, Meredith 2016, right?
You share it to him.
So, yeah. So
do you have a Facebook page? Does your Coast Guard Academy have you can share it to the Facebook
there
page.
Probably
please,
is a class,
please.
There probably is a class Facebook page.
It goes, please.
I actually don't know. I don't really look at Facebook
no,
too
the
much.
Coast Guard Academy does not have a graduation Facebook page. It's the freaking Coast Guard Academy.
Beaver River
something community college. Okay, go ahead.
I think our class probably has a Facebook page.
Nice.
I think
Facebook's for like
losers.
Yeah, the older folks.
You should edit that out.
Yeah.
I'm not real big on social media now. I don't.
Yeah.
It's
good for you.
It's kind of a time suck.
It's the right choice.
Anyways, 2016 civil engineering was my major. Never used it, probably never will, but it was really cool.
Join the club.
Yeah, right. So my undergrad's in civil engineering, and then so graduated, commissioned 2016, May of 2016. I did, So I did like a 6-week program, Saratoga Fellows graduate. It's kind of like a graduate study style program it was like the Coast Guard actually let me do this, which is really cool. It was a Christian-based program for junior officers. About 8 of us went and lived in a community together for 6 weeks, and we got to study like just war theory, philosophy, ethics, and American history, and like all this stuff, like as it pertains to like principled faith-based leadership specifically for the military. They do programs for other college students as well, like a fellowship program, but this is a 6-week fellowship program specifically for newly commissioned officers in the U.S. military. Okay. So that was super cool.
Because when you come out of the academy, you're a commissioned officer then at that point.
Yep. Yeah. So when you graduate, you get your different. So when you graduate, you get your degree, right, for your academic stuff, and then you get your commission, which is the military side of it. So your graduation day is also your commissioning day. They happen on the at the same time. You get your degree from the dean of academics, and then you get your commission from usually whatever whatever major speaker is there. So like for me, it was Jay Johnson, who's the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security at the time. And then Emma's was Kamala Harris when she was VP. Really? When Emma graduated. So I got to give Emma her commission and like shake Vice President Harris's hand and everything, which is pretty cool. Yeah, we got pictures
of
that.
Nice firm handshake, or was it
floppy? Nice. You talking about me or her? Oh yeah,
nice firm handshake. She's got that going.
She had a good handshake. Paul, not so much.
Yeah. Do this wrong, get tackled off the stage in my whites.
Yeah, right.
But
that would have been a YouTube. That would have been a YouTube.
So I graduated from the academy in 2016, degree in civil engineering. Did that program for 6 weeks. Reported in August of 2016 to the Stratton. So from 2016 to the summer of 2018, I was on the Cutter Stratton, national security cutter, Alameda, California, doing counter drug, law enforcement, and some patrols in Alaska, doing search and rescue kind of stuff. Deck watch officer is my kind of specialty. So I drive ships. It's kind of like what when the Coast Guard looks at me, what's your specialty? I'm a cutterman. Actually, I'm a permanent cutterman now, which means that I've done over 5 years of sea time on Coast Guard cutters. So ship driver, got to drive that thing, which is super cool. Big ship, getting to do ship handling and driving that in and out of ports and stuff like that. So I did that for 2 years. 2018, moved to Miami, Florida. I was a commanding officer on an 87-foot patrol boat in Miami Beach, Florida. For 2 years, the mighty Coast Guard cutter Cochito.
Cochito. That's the coolest thing ever. Why does the military know how to name things perfectly?
Yeah. So the Cochito is like a 40-pound dolphin, endangered dolphin that lives like only in like the Gulf of San Diego or the Gulf of Southern California off of San Diego. There's like 40 in the world or something like that. The Cochitos. Yeah.
That's sweet.
So Coast Guard Cochito.
So you were a commanding officer then?
Yep, a CO. So it was 12-person crew, including myself. 87 feet, not huge, but that was really cool experience. Having the commanding officer kind of ultimate authority, responsibility stuff as far as your unit goes. It's kind of wild how much trust and responsibility the Coast Guard is willing to put in an O2, right? I was a lieutenant junior grade at the time, 2 years under my belt of actual active duty experience. And I'm a commanding officer of, these people that are, it's just wild that the Coast Guard does that. Really cool in terms of like learning and everything. But like in hindsight, I guess like maybe at the time I thought maybe I was somewhat prepared. In hindsight, it's like I had no business, being the CO of my own unit. But just super cool that the Coast Guard lets you do that, and kind of puts that confidence in you. I didn't crash. No one got killed, during my time as a CO.
Those are wins.
Never hit the dock parking it?
Not hard anyways, not hard. But that thing drives really easy. It's not like driving the 418-foot cutter.
Yeah,
it's like driving a big
You
small
said that was
boat.
84?
87.
He's like 87, tiny little boat. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, the engines is like the response time, right? Like on the throttles is
pretty good.
it's way better
The bow thruster, you got a bow thruster on that?
No, not on the 87. No, but it's twin screws, so you can you split the throttles.
Oh yeah,
and it's just like right. You turn on the spot. It's super easy to drive. You guys could do it after a day of messing around with it. Honestly,
messing around with it, hitting a lot of boats and docks.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But so I was CEO on 87 in Florida Straits. So there we were doing drug and migrant patrols between the Bahamas and Florida, South Florida, and the North Florida Straits. So a lot of folks don't know this, but 40 nautical miles from Miami to Bimini, Bahamas, and then it's only like 60 or 70 nautical miles from West Palm Beach, Florida, to the west end of I can't remember the name of the island right now, though, but it's one of the bigger islands in the Bahamas. So the Bahamas are really close to South Florida. So that's like a major staging point for a lot of smuggling operations, maritime smuggling operations into the U.S. So a lot of times you get migrants that would travel to the Bahamas from Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, or really anywhere in the world. We get Chinese migrants. We get migrants from other points. And
it's like a waypoint where they
like
start out.
Yeah,
like they all come to that spot.
Right. Well, because there's some ridiculous amount, like 150 countries that you can travel to the Bahamas without needing a visa or something like that.
Seems like an easy fix.
Yeah. So like the Bahamas is a major staging point
Bahamas. For help us out.
Yeah, for drug and migrant smuggling and trafficking and stuff like that. So we did, in my time as a CEO on the 87, we probably did 160 boardings of boats that were looking for anything westbound, because the thing there is like the illicit traffic on the national security cutter, easy to spot, right? This 40-foot boat with a tarp covering the bow and 2 outboards and 3 fishermen has no business being 800 nautical miles offshore and heading towards Mexico. All right, like you know what they're there for. In the Florida Straits, there is so much money there, and so many people that have boats that they're able to like, hey, let's just take a weekend trip to the Bahamas. So on Sundays, there's all these boats that's legitimate recreational traffic coming from the Bahamas back into the south, to southern Florida, and all the illicit traffic just blends in with that. Sure. And a lot of these guys too that have like these really nice boats, like they might be taking 5 keys of cocaine, just stuff somewhere that you're never going to find because you don't have RS to rip into, reasonable suspicion. Sorry, right? Like you don't have reasonable suspicion to rip into open whatever compartment on their boat that they have this. So like finding the drugs that come from the Bahamas is super hard without like having, good intel and then being able to build the reasonable suspicion based on observations and not on intel, right? To be able to get into these spaces. So I never got a drug bust the whole time that, in 160 boardings or whatever we did of westbound boats from the Bahamas to Florida, never got a drug bust. Had one interdiction though that was really cool, which is kind of my claim to fame as a CEO. As far as like the LE stuff, we also did a lot of security operations. So Trump's first term, Mar-a-Lago's in West Palm Beach. So we would spend days at a time sitting 100 yards off Mar-a-Lago Beach.
Did you know it's only worth $16 million?
Sounds like a nice tax bill.
The outhouse is worth $16 million.
Yeah. But we were just
that's cool. Mar-a-Lago,
getting our butts handed to us like over Christmas or whatever. Like the sea state is just absolutely miserable, but you're supporting the Secret Service with, like a security mission or whatever. So we were just getting our butts handed to us, holding station 100 yards off of Mar-a-Lago for like 3 days
because it's
over Christmas.
Rough water.
Because the sea state was so bad. Yeah. Normally we wouldn't stay out in that, but based on the fact that like he was there, and we're supporting the security op and everything. So that was, fun times. Anyways, the LE stuff. So the one kind of claim to fame for law enforcement stuff when I was a CEO was we had a big cabin cruiser that was coming in from the Bahamas into Hullover Inlet, which if you ever look at a Qualified Captain or whatever YouTube channel of boats trying to get out of inlets with like an east wind with an ebbing current in Hullover Inlet, right? Like the current's coming out, the wind's blowing in, the waves go like this. And like there's so many videos on YouTube.
And my father-in-law watches there's some doc or something in Miami, I think.
Black Black Point Marina.
Yeah.
With guys trying to back their boats in, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Oh, no. Okay. So
I'm talking about like when they're going in and out.
Yeah, in and out. That's it. So that's Holliver Inlet, right? And other inlets on the south coast of Florida get that way. Dude. But they're like, there's the intercoastal waterway, so there's so much water inside the chain of islands. And then when the current is either coming in or going out, right? If it's an ebbing current, the current can flow out of those inlets back into the ocean at like 4 or 5 knots. Whoa. And when the wind is blowing in like this, it just stacks it up. So when the guys are trying to go in or out on their boats, it's hilarious.
Yeah. No, I can't remember the guy's YouTube channel. There's like he just sits there all day and just videos people going in and
out. Like falling off, like they're falling off these boats and all this stuff, and it's hilarious. Anyways, Holliver Inlet. So that's also a major point because that's a little sketchier area of Miami, like North Miami Beach.
Miami boat ramps.
I think
Miami boat ramps. Yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah. Well, so every idiot in South Florida has a boat. So there's
amazing.
There's also videos of people trying to back their trailers in at boat ramps and stuff like that. If you've never watched those, you need to watch this because this is like $80,000 pickup trucks like sliding backwards into the my gosh, man. They have no idea what they're doing or jackknifing, and it's hilarious.
Like Family Guy.
There's guys getting out. There's guys getting out and they're yelling at people that are recording them. It's like, dude, this is a public boat range. Like,
people are parked up with like picnic chairs.
I'm well within my rights. Yeah, that's a Saturday pastime in South Florida is watching people launch and recover at these ramps. It's hilarious.
That's so dangerous, man.
So we had a boat for a little while, and like, I actually, when I first bought it, I took it in like the Walmart parking lot and like practiced for like 30 minutes with backing up before taking it to the ramp side. It didn't look like you
didn't get caught on YouTube. Look at this Coast Guard commanding officer get back up his boat.
Such a bad look.
Oh my goodness. It was just
dude, it's wild. Yeah,
so Holliver Inlet, right? So what are we on? 87. We did a boarding on a boat that was at nighttime trying to get into Holliver Inlet. Almost didn't board it, except for the fact that we'd been looking at this boat on the FLIR. Our camera, it's a forward-looking infrared, right? So you use the infrared at night. We were looking at it. We were darkened ship, lights out for the law enforcement mission, and we could see 2 guys on there. We hit them up on the radio. Turn the lights, turn on the blue light. Hey, there's Coast Guard, Channel 16, switch to whatever channel, ask him what he's doing, how many people you got on board. Oh, it's just me. And we're like, yeah, right. We saw the other guy with you. So right away, we know that he's not being truthful. Right. So we hop on board and sent two of the guys over to do a boarding. The guy's not letting them into some of the spaces that we need to get into. There's like, locked cabin doors and stuff like that. So I called my boss and I was like, hey, this something sketchy here. I don't have the manpower to be able to send more boarding team members over because I think we were only underway with like 9 or 10 guys at that time, guys and gals. And so we worked through my boss, got Air Marine Operations CBP to meet us at the dock, brought the boat into the dock, and they got into those spaces and stuff. And it was like 14 Chinese migrants that were trying to, get into the U.S. illegally. Some of them were actually being trafficked and they didn't know that they were being trafficked. And there was the guy that was actually the operator had ties to like the Italian mob in Miami and stuff like that. Like he had a rap sheet for, all kinds of smuggling and whatnot. Yeah. And then there was another guy that was a Bahamian smuggler that was, on board as well. So it ended up being, a great interdiction of some folks that were ultimately being trafficked that they didn't realize they were being trafficked, but they were going to be like, forced into some type of, equivalent of a slavery kind of thing. And they ended up getting an AMO ripped into that boat a couple weeks later, and they found like $200,000 in cash or something like that too. So that was a really cool interdiction. Like, oh, hey, 160 boardings that we've done over the 2 years, like actually had some kind of impact. We were able to get a really cool interdiction during the time that I was there. So that was 18 to 20. We got married when we were in Miami. So Mara was at the civil engineering unit in Miami, so we got married 2018. When we were there, and then 18 and 20, CO on the cutter. In 2020, I went to across the city to District 7, which was the staff job. in Miami because Mayor had another year. So that's actually, you know, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, like, you know, in hindsight, you can see where I tried to do all these things. But you know, God was just like kind of weaving the thread of life and, you know, whatever his plan was. So when I was leaving the Cutter, I was trying to go to DC to do a congressional affairs, Coast Guard, like congressional affairs job where I would have worked with like a congressman and stuff like that. Pretty high profile job. I actually went up to DC and like interviewed for it and everything. And it would have been really cool to have done. And like, I really wanted to do it at the time, right? It was like, this is like what you do for kind of your high speed, you know, your high speed next tour. This really sets you up for success. Yeah. Yep. To do like these other high profile jobs and stuff. But I was going to, what we call geo-batch. I was going to be a geo-bachelor. I was going to go up there for a year when Mare was still in Miami and finishing her time at the civil engineering unit. Which I was like, oh, it's fine. Like, you know, we'll be fine and all that. And I'll do this. Didn't end up getting that, you know, got to the final process. Didn't end up getting it for, you know, for whatever reason. But you can see like in hindsight how that's not what God had for us. Right. Like ended up going to D7, stayed in Miami. We had Eli, you know, 6 months or like, you know, a year later or whatever. So we ended up having our first kid. And it's just not what the Lord had for us, which in hindsight, you can see that. And in hindsight too, that would have been absolutely miserable. Cause I don't know if you guys remember what happened in the winter of 2020, COVID in DC would have been awful, awful. Right. And I also would have been there during like, I also would have been there during like the January 6th stuff and all that, right? Like, right in the vicinity of all that stuff. And just like, you know, the political environment, as everyone knows in the last 8 years, is just not something that in hindsight I would have wanted to deal with. So I'm so thankful to the Lord that he didn't, you know, allow that to come to pass. So anyways, stayed in Miami, did the staff job at District 7 enforcement, which District 7, so the Coast Guard, right? There's the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is broken up into an Atlantic area and Pacific area. The areas are broken up into districts. So District 7 is all of the southeastern United States and the Caribbean region. And then the districts are broken up into sectors, and then the sectors have stations. So that's how like the whole world really is broken up into areas of responsibility for what, you know, the U.S. Coast Guard is responsible for as far as Coast Guard stuff is concerned. So I worked at District 7, which was the southeastern U.S., 34, you know, sovereign nations and territories and stuff like that we kind of worked with, and the whole Caribbean Ocean. So that's when I was doing the, you know, the stuff I was talking about with the mass migration, recent mass migration from like Haiti and Cuba, a lot of counter-drug enforcement stuff in the Central Caribbean, because there's a lot of drugs that also, you know, like in the East Pac that flow through the Caribbean from Colombia up to Dominican Republic to Haiti, straight into Puerto Rico from Colombia and stuff like that through the Caribbean. So we were working to combat all that stuff. So that was 2020 to 2023. During that time. So another thing that I was trying to do that, you know, the Lord closed the door on. So I was working with a lot of Homeland Security investigations guys when I was in District 7. So HSI, which is the DHS's investigative arm. So Department of Justice, the FBI is to DOJ. As HSI is to DHS. Okay. So HSI is the investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security. And I was really trying to do HSI. Like I thought that I wanted to do that, you know, keep going with law enforcement.
What year was that?
2021, 2022 is when I was going through the application stuff for all that.
So I remember having a conversation with you at one point and you were talking more about moving into that, like law enforcement specific. Yeah.
I probably started that in 2021. And a lot of that was like, I was kind of fed up with Coast Guard law enforcement at the time because the Coast Guard law enforcement is just like, not to bash on the Coast Guard too much, but it's so inefficient. It's just like, and the way that like, there's a lot of really cool leeway and authorities, especially for like the interdictions and international water stuff that you get to do. But then there's also a ridiculous amount of like red tape and bureaucracy that you have to go through to take any kind of action. Whereas like the HSI guys and the Air Marine Operations guys, like they have the authority in and of themselves to, you know, make arrests and like do all these things. Like if you're on a Coast Guard small boat and you want to use force to stop a non-compliant vessel, you have to get like the admiral's authorization at the time. So it's like 30 or 45 minutes worth of phone calls as you're like chasing this boat, like, you know, stop, please stop. I can't shoot at you yet, so you need to stop your boat. Whereas like AMO could just roll up and they'd be like, stop your boat. No. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Warning shots, right? Like, didn't work. Pepper ball, pop, pop, pop. You know, you're shooting with a paintball gun that's got little powdered OC. It's OC in pepper or in powder form. That doesn't work. And then they're shooting engines out. Like those guys can get through those steps in a matter of 5 minutes. It takes the Coast Guard an hour to get to that stuff. So that's just an example, like some of the inefficiency. And there's also a lot of bureaucracy, you know, working at like that kind of staff level headquarters job. So all that to say, I was kind of fed up with Coast Guard law enforcement and I wanted to get out and do something else. So I went through a 1.5 years worth of hiring process, you know, application on USA Jobs, 3 different phases of applications, like taking tests online, taking in-person tests, doing like Zoom interviews with HSI agents from, you know, around the country. Got a conditional offer for HSI, you know, thought I was going to be good, paid my own way to go to Dallas to take the polygraph and do all that. So fun. Like somehow passed the polygraph. That was just miserable. I know you talked about the polygraph. I hated the polygraph is just, did not like that, but somehow passed it because the guy kept telling me I was lying.
Almost like that's kind of like
the norm.
What you do.
Yeah. I was trying to be.
Catch you in a lie.
See, that's the thing is like conscientious is the word you used for me earlier, right? Like I'm super conscientious, like super self-conscious. Like I want to make sure that I'm telling you that I'm not trying to hide something, but I'm also like super hard on myself. Like they're like, are you someone who follows policy? Yes. It's like, I know there's times that I've broken policy. Yeah. And like, so I try to like spill my guts as much as possible, but I still like in the back of my mind, I'm like, I know that there's times where I've been like, I'm like, this policy or whatever is stupid. Like I've not followed that. Yeah. And I don't think I necessarily have a propensity to do that, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like I have a propensity to maybe not follow policy when I think it's stupid, like, which they don't want to hear, right? Like they want you to say like, I follow the rules. So,
just yes or no, sir.
Yeah, there's no nuance.
There's not supposed to be any nuance. So I think that's what was tripping me up on the polygraph. Somehow I passed it.
Wait, let's just talk about that for 1 second. Talk about the most, like, first of all, very manipulative. That's the whole point of it. That's why they're not admissible in court.
Right.
Is to get you to be like, have you ever, you're showing deception here. Or is there anything you're telling me? And they're like, oh yeah, well, all this, fail.
Right.
You know, and instead of just like sticking to your guns.
Right.
I'm also very conscientious, 99th percentile actually. And one of the things for me was like, I'm going to tell you exactly the truth. If that's not good enough for you, that's fine. And then when you told me I was lying, I was actually like offended.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I was like, dude, this is my number one fear is to come in here and you tell me that I'm lying when I'm not lying.
Right.
He's like, all right, we'll try it again. Oh, you passed. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And then later I figured out like what the polygraph actually was because we had our own unit developed at that point. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
somehow I passed it. Not a fan of doing the polygraph.
Sensor on you sit on a sensor and around your chest. And
at one point before, like I'm nervous to start it, right? And I go, I take a deep breath, and the guy goes, "You do that again, you're gonna fail."
So
you're not allowed to.
So like the chest harness monitors your breathing. You've got sweat and your pulse and
all that.
So he's like purposely being a jerk.
Well, no, because you're not allowed to try to like monitor you're not allowed to try to use techniques that would regulate your heart rate or make you less stressed.
Yeah. And the worst part of the whole thing was one point he said, "You're controlling your breathing." And I was like,
I am. Yeah.
I'll try to breathe more, not breathy.
Yeah. But then like the whole rest of the time, I'm just like, how do I not focus on my breathing?
Yeah. Right. Anyway, so I did the polygraph, passed the polygraph, and then I'm getting to the point. Well, no. So this is I don't know how much you guys like to talk about politics and whatnot on here, but
dude, we're uncensored here, man.
I'm a big fan of. Maybe not Elon Musk, but I'm a big fan of the idea of the Doge, like government efficiency. The government sucks in terms of efficiency. And I work for the government, and I don't care who works for the government that's hearing me say this, but the government is inefficient.
Oh, yeah. It's not new news to anybody, I don't think. Yeah.
But so I'm a big fan of anything that can be done to like make the government more efficient. Like that's...
Should have been done a long time ago.
By the people, for the people. The first government is for the people. It's not the self-licking ice cream cone that it's become.
I've never heard that before.
The hiring process for HSI was just highlighted government inefficiency for me. Mm-hmm. I was like, look, you're telling me that you guys are trying to hire all the people that you can, that you need qualified candidates. I have 7 years of Coast Guard law enforcement experience doing exactly what you guys are going to be asking me to investigate and do. I'm like, without trying to sound prideful for this, like I am the ideal candidate for this. And the first thing I did was the first time I went through the hiring process, because I went through 2 iterations of it, was internal solicitation on USA Jobs. There's it's DHS only. It's internal to DHS only. All the HSI agents that I knew and that I had been working with, they're like, dude, you got to put in for this one. It's going to be so much more streamlined and all this. So I'm like, cool. I put in for it. I get through the whole process, get the conditional offer. And then an hour later, it's like, we're sorry, you have not, you're ineligible for this solicitation. Come to find out, it was because it was for DHS civilians only. The Coast Guard didn't count for it because I wasn't being paid on the GS pay scale. I was on, the military pay scale. So even though the Coast Guard's in DHS, we're on the military pay scale, somehow it didn't correlate that I was able to put in for the DHS internal solicitation. They're only looking for civilians in DHS. So I put in for it again after that. And by that time, I'm like, are you kidding me? I've done this for the last 10 months.
Yep.
And now you're
put
telling
up your
me
own money and your own time. And
yeah. Well, so that was before the polygraph, but I'm getting ready to I'm getting ready to drop letters for the Coast Guard and stuff, like telling the Coast Guard I'm getting out and whatnot, which if you actually send that letter to headquarters and then you pull it back, you incur a year of obligation.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
So if I'm about to send this letter, I need to know that I've got something I'm going to.
Right.
Anyway, so that didn't apply to me, the DHS internal solicitation. So I put in for an open solicitation that's open for anyone. And by this time, I'm kind of starting to be like, oh man, do I really want to do this? But I got funneled through all of the phases again because I had passed them within the previous year already. So I was just kept getting automatic emails like, you've been, accepted for this. Oh, you've made it through phase 1. You've made it through phase 2. I haven't actually done anything again, but since I did it within the last year, it just automatically got me all the way through it. And then I got the conditional offer again. And then that's when I had to go and do the medical. I had to go and do pay my own way to go do the polygraph in Dallas, and all that stuff. So I went and did all that.
Why Dallas?
There's
nowhere closer?
That's where they do it.
Or do they only have their people do it?
Yep.
Got it.
Yep, yeah.
Because there's polygraph people everywhere.
All the different agencies, so all the federal agencies, they only have themselves do it. FBI does their own, HSI does their own, Border Patrol does their own, AMO does their own. They all do their own polygraphs. Because there's different standards that each of those agencies has too on the polygraph. However that scale works, there's different standards of whatever. So anyways, got through that whole thing. Now it's getting to February and I'm about to get orders. I'd already put in pics for the Coast Guard because I got I'm working parallel efforts here, right? To see what's going to happen because I got to keep my doors open for the Coast Guard. I already put in for pics for the Coast Guard and I hit up the hiring, the HR office with HSI. And I'm like, hey, the Coast Guard's about to call me with orders here. And you guys haven't gotten back to me in the last 4 months. I need to know what's going on. Am I going to get a job with HSI or not? Because the Coast Guard's about to call me with my next set of orders and I got to figure this out.
And that's a commitment. That's another how many?
Yeah. If you take orders, you got to do a year of those orders before you could get out. They emailed me back and they're like, you have been found ineligible because of a medical issue. So I have a herniated disc in my lower back that I had 3 years ago now, probably, that came out in the medical exam, which I've been able to work through and everything. But for whatever reason, that was a hang up for HSI. And they're like, but ... let's see if we can string you on a little further. You can put in for the waiver for this if you get all these letters of recommendation and all this stuff. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I got to go through all this again. And that night, my buddy, who was the detailer at the time, the detailer who just happened to be a guy that I graduated with, called me. He was like, hey, you're going to get your number one pick on your orders with the Coast Guard, which was to go and do the icebreaker buoy tender in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, which is where we are now. So that was the Lord telling me, HSI, that's not the path for you.
There's doors closing.
Yep, that door's
too many
that door's
technicalities.
Close.
Maybe that's just not where you're supposed to be.
Yep, that door's going to close. So, so I've gotten out of law enforcement since, now we're in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. I'm on now on a 140-foot what's called a Bay class ice breaking tug. So 140 feet. And one of only two of the 140s that has a 120-foot H navigation barge. So it's a barge that we tie onto the front of the tug, and we push that around for spring, summer, fall months to work buoys. So it's got a crane on it. So we, go up to buoys and essentially use the crane to grab them, bring them on board, either swap it, do whatever chain work you need. You pull the sinker up, check the sinker, all that kind of stuff, and then put it back out. So that's what we do in like the spring, summer, fall. And then we detach from the barge and we break ice in the wintertime for traffic, maritime traffic flowing through the Great Lakes during the ice season.
We keep the roads clear for trade and whatnot. Is that what you mean?
The lakes. The lakes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Like trade routes and whatnot. Is that what it is? Okay. Or for your own folks.
Trade routes. No, it's for merchant marine vessels. Yeah. It's not really. I guess, trade routes is kind of are
there common paths that they are traveling that you're keeping clear?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the beginning of ice season, we'll keep Green Bay open for a while. They're getting the last petroleum and salt and other dry bulk goods into Green Bay, and then they close Green Bay for the. Yep, that's it. So if you search Coast Guard cutter Mobile Bay, yep, and it'll have a picture of the barge too. So we keep Green Bay open at the beginning of the year. And then if you're familiar with Great Lakes hydrography, I guess.
100%.
Geography of the Great Lakes.
So that's your actual boat?
Yep, that's the actual ship. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Ship.
So the
when is the distinction between boat to ship? When you're
65 feet is how the Coast Guard defines it. So
you're like a boat expert.
Anything.
He is.
Are you like a boat? Are you an expert? Would you call yourself an expert?
No, absolutely not. I'm not an expert. I don't think I'm an expert.
Who doesn't think he's an expert? What an expert!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no. There's guys that know way more about Coast Guard cutters and boats and stuff like that than I do. So, but to answer your question, we call it ship and boat interchangeably. It's kind of a colloquial term. I feel like Eugene using the term
colloquial.
Colloquialism.
You don't you're not given a hard time for calling it a boat.
No, we call it a boat all the time.
Yeah, everybody
the Coast Guard
at you behind
is 65 feet.
He just called it a boat.
Yeah. When it goes to 65 feet is when it becomes a cutter, and it needs to have an officer in charge or a commanding officer, and not coxswain to drive it. Coxswains drive boats. So
that's probably what I would have done then.
What's interesting to me is that I don't know why, this is just the way that I think. It's interesting to me that the job that you're doing in Wisconsin is not like a private job, like the government.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, right?
Why there's not a tug ferry.
A company takes care of that.
Yeah, if you get into what the Coast Guard or the government should and should not be doing, that's a big question there, right? How much more of H navigation could be privatized? How much more of icebreaking could be privatized? I will tell you, a lot of the icebreaking stuff, especially in the harbors and whatnot, is handled by private tug companies. So a lot of the icebreaking, in the port of Green Bay, we don't actually go into the port, into the river where Green Bay is. That's all the tug companies do that.
Okay.
But the major shipping channels that are used by multiple of your shipping companies and stuff like that, they're called so all the waterways are broken into tiers. It's tier 1 through 4. Tier 1 is the highest priority for the government to make sure that it stays open for all kinds of traffic, mostly merchant traffic to be able to flow through. So Green Bay is a tier 1, what we call a tier 1 waterway. The Straits of Mackinac, when I was talking about Great Lakes geography, the Straits of Mackinac is what connects Lake Michigan to Lake Huron. There's a narrow strait, ice gets jammed into there. But that's the only way that, boats from Green Bay, Milwaukee, Chicago, Calumet, which is in, it's just east of Chicago, Gary, Indiana, a lot of steel and stuff like that. The only way that any of the boats that are going to that area is getting back into the rest of the Great Lakes is through the Straits of Mackinac in the wintertime. So that's a tier 1 waterway, high priority. You got to keep that free for merchant traffic to be able to flow through that. So
yeah.
But in terms of private companies doing stuff like that, I think that there would be a way to be able to maybe privatize some of that work. It would take a lot.
Contracts
to figure that out. Contracts, and I don't actually know if it would be more efficient in terms of money to have it be contracted to private companies and stuff like that.
Someone's got to pay for it.
Probably pretty expensive.
Yeah, like the steel company who needs to get through there has to be paying some kind of
right. But there's a balance. There's a balance somewhere in there, right? Like I was talking about earlier, like government for the people, by the people. Like I'm more of a small government guy, but like government's got to be there for the people, right? So keeping those shipping lanes open for the merchant traffic and stuff that is serving the people, like I think that is reasonable that the government is responsible for keeping a lot of that stuff open and maintaining the H navigation and stuff like that for the the traffic. But it's something like 5% of the U.S. GDP flows through the Great Lakes via maritime means.
Wow.
On like some of those Great Lakes merchant mariner vessels. So it's pretty important. What the
interstate and international from Canada.
Oh yeah, these would be not just Canada. There's like what we call salties that come in from all points international.
How ironic.
That actually come into the St. Lawrence Seaway into Lake Ontario through the Welland Canal into Lake Erie. Over, to Detroit and St. Clair rivers up into Lake Huron, and they can. I mean, theoretically, you can go. Again, this is why I was like, it'd be great to have a map or chart really show this stuff. But theoretically, you can get via boat from Duluth, Minnesota, all the way through Lake Superior, through the through the Sioux Locks, down the St. Mary's River into Lake Huron, down the St. Clair and Detroit rivers, through Lake Erie, up the Welland Canal, Lake Ontario, out to St. Lawrence Seaway, into the ocean, and wherever the heck you want to go, So,
I think that I wouldn't. You think like the Great Lakes would be kind of like isolated, but they're not. They're connected to the rest of the world.
Yep.
Do you, just hearing you talk about straits of this and straits of that and bay this, and like, do you love oceanography or whatever this is called? Like, do you love
maritime?
What you
do? Not really. I mean, I enjoy what I do.
Because you sound like an expert. And you sound like
it's just because it's my job, right? This is good because I feel like now we're gonna be able to get into like a part of like our discussion where it's actually like not just my life. We could talk about like kind of more stuff that is I don't know if heady is the word for it, but like purpose of life stuff, if you will, right? Like the Coast Guard is not. The Coast Guard it's a means to an end to glorify God and make him known is the way that I think about it, right? Like the Coast Guard itself and being like on boats is not I'm passionate about it and I enjoy it. But the thing that I enjoy about it is more so, I used to be like this is so cool. Like I'm out here in the middle of the night when all my friends are in bed and my family's in bed and like I'm protecting the coast and all this kind of stuff. But more so now it's less of like adventure and more of like it's a mission field, if that makes sense. I love the guys that I work with. I have just been blessed to have some of the coolest people on the crews that I've been in. And even when I was at the staff job, like some of the folks that I was able to meet and work with there, was just really, really special. But talk about just a unique opportunity that a lot of people don't get to constantly be meeting different people and trying to, as much as possible, pour into them with, trying to be a light. I can be really hard on myself with like, to what level I'm actually being a light and, proclaiming the truth about Christ and stuff like that. But I also think that there is something to be said about, the whole proclaim the gospel wherever you go and use words if necessary. Like I don't agree with that phrase in itself, because I think a lot of people can use that as an excuse to say like, I don't need to talk about my faith. I can just live it out. Like I think living out your faith is talking about it, but there's also absolutely aspects where, it's word and deed, right? So you can't be just a deed person and just, being a quote good person and shining your light that way. Like you've got to talk about it at some point, but there's absolutely something to be said about just being diligent in your work, working really hard, and people will, seeing something different in you than from other people. Like, I think that everyone that I work with on the crew knows that I'm a Christian. But I've never
necessarily talk to like all of the guys about my faith. You know what I mean? But I think that like guys just kind of know that, I think. Yeah. And I've definitely had more pointed conversations with the guys on board and stuff like that. And that's actually something that I want to have more of. Like I always want to be better about that. But to get back to your question though, I enjoy being in the Coast Guard, but it is, I don't know what my passion is really at this point in my life. I feel like I hit a point in my life it would have been when I left the 87. So when was that? 2020, 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, I ran out of planned life goals, if that makes sense. Like I did a poor job of like continuing to set goals for myself. When I was in high school and we did our senior portfolios, you remember those? Mm-hmm. And we had to like set all our goals and stuff like that. Yeah. Like my goals were to go to college, play football, start on the football team, start my junior year to be a captain, and then to command my own Coast Guard ship. Like I set all those goals when I was a senior in high school, and the Lord was faithful to help me achieve all those goals. Right? Like I got to
too fast.
Yeah. I got to start. I was a captain my senior year of the football team. I got to be a CEO of a patrol boat. Like all these really cool things, but then somewhere in there, I stopped setting goals for myself of like, what do I want to do in terms of like achievements? Mm-hmm. And that's been kind of hard for me, but I realize now that like, I think I just got to kind of lean into the Lord for that stuff, because there's, I've gotten married. My wife, she might listen to this podcast, but I'll try to say this without tearing up. My wife is the most wonderful woman in the world. She's absolutely, absolutely incredible. If not for the Coast Guard, I wouldn't have met Meredith. We went to the academy together, and then just having our 3 little guys over the last 4 years, right? Like that's just that's my life goal now, I guess, right? And I know it's the same thing for you guys too, is providing for my family, which is what the Coast Guard does for them. In that regard, right? Like that's our source of income and kind of provision. That's how I, seek to provide for them, but then also, creating and leading a godly household for my wife and for myself and for my wife to continue to grow closer to the Lord, closer together, but then also discipling our 3 little kids. And if we happen to have more kids, if the Lord blesses us with that, like that's like our primary mission field now and stuff like that. But then also the Coast Guard is like kind of the secondary mission field. So to circle back to it again, I'm not like super passionate about the Coast Guard. I don't know what I'm super passionate about. I think that maybe like there's a lot of, just like, hobbies wise, I've gotten really into bow hunting the last couple of years, like since I was in Miami, started bow hunting with a buddy in Miami. I was a big hunter growing up, but, football always was competing with that in the fall, but got really into bow hunting the last couple of years. But that's another thing that, kind of highlights some other stuff, and you're going to have to do a lot of editing of this because I'm jumping around again.
No,
but
I refuse.
Yeah. So something that I've struggled with over the years has been like an idolatry kind of mindset, right? Like where I look at things in my life to fill the God void, without really. And I think I've realized it, and I've tried to kind of combat that. But all through like maybe high school and college, there was kind of a 2 or 3 things there. Where it's like having a relationship with some girl, like a girl is gonna fill this void or desire or whatever. So having a relationship, and then also playing football, and then I'm not going to get into the whole relationship fiasco stuff of my life through college and all that. But thank God, eventually he brought me back to Meredith, and we were. That all ended up working out. We were able to get married a couple of years after graduating from the academy. But again, I'm not going to get into all that stuff right now. But got into the Coast Guard and really kind of started idolizing law enforcement, right? Like I'm going to do this high speed stuff, like high speed pursuits on the high seas, guns blazing, like, we're going to go shoot out engines. I got to multiple times in the middle of the night, super cool, roll up on Go Fast, that the helicopter just shot the engines out, guns drawn, lights, flashlights, blue lights going, everything. Middle of nowhere, East Pacific, right? Like 800 miles from the nearest shore, hopping on board, putting these guys in cuffs, seizing thousands of kilograms of cocaine, right? Like super cool. But just like, I thought that would fill the void. Didn't fill the void, right? And then we're getting ready to go to Miami. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, maybe being a CEO of my own boat, but then also I'm going to get my own boat, right? Like I'm going to have a little 20-foot center console when I'm in Miami. And then I got into backcountry saltwater fishing, man, in Florida. Talk about fun. Getting to go fishing in the, in like the Florida Keys, but then you also get down into like the Everglades National Park. A lot of people don't know this, but the southern point of the peninsula of Florida, right? There's like, do it for the camera here. There's the peninsula of Florida, and then there's like the Keys, right? On the southern part of that peninsula is where Everglades National Park is. It's a huge, like maybe millions of acres, certainly hundreds of thousands of acres of South Florida. The peninsula is Everglades National Park. You can drive through one road that goes out to this place called Flamingo, and you can launch boats down there in the park and go out and you can fish the backwater stuff of the it's called backcountry fishing of South Florida, where saltwater meets where the Everglades freshwater is flowing out. And it is just the most like archaic, wild, sharks everywhere. There's saltwater crocodiles, dolphins. Like I would be fishing down there. I saw dolphins at low tide, like swimming up and diving into mud banks to like digging crabs out of mud banks and stuff like that. Just like the most wild stuff. And you're catching monster fish back there, and it's freaking awesome.
So when are we going?
But seriously. So
I would love to go.
Elliot and I went it was the first fall that we went down there. We just bought the boat, and it was right before our wedding. Elliot came down because he was going to do the drive up to Virginia with me for the wedding. Yeah. And we took the boat out, and I didn't know what I was doing. So we caught like, one little, drum or something like that, like some piddly little fish. But I wish that, we could have had more of you guys down to like do that stuff and whatnot. One of my buddies, actually, if you guys ever go to shout out Legacy Charters, his name is Paul Manugian. He has a guide service, pretty small time right now in South Florida, but he has fished the backcountry waters like his whole life, and he has a guide service now. He takes guys out and fishing and whatnot. So if you're trying to go to South Florida and you want to do backcountry fishing, look up Legacy Charters, Paul Manugian, Captain Paul Manugian, and he'll take you out like, super, super reasonable price. And it's just absolutely wild getting into that stuff. Anyways, where I was going with that is like, that was my next idol, was backcountry fishing in Miami, when we had that boat. And that was like, these are things that just like would consume my thoughts, right? Like I'm just thinking about fishing all the time. And like, when's the next time that I can get down there to go fishing? And stuff like that. So that was like, kind of my idol then. And then, like I was saying, like I got into bow hunting, right? So I think the last couple of years, probably the last 3-4 years, like my struggle with some kind of idol that like has consumed a lot of my time and energy and stuff like that has been like bow hunting, right? And trying to, get in the woods and shoot the biggest buck I can and stuff like that. So that's definitely been a struggle for me over the years, and something that I've tried to kind of, be more and more aware of, and try to make sure that those things are in their rightful place. Because I think all those things have a place, right? Like recreation has a place. And rest, and being able to spend time with friends and family, obviously, and all that kind of stuff. Like it has its place, but it can't be God's in a section over here, and then fishing, and then work, and then hunting or whatever. It's got to be God permeating absolutely every part of your life. So, God in your family, God in your work, God in your recreation, and all that kind of stuff. And I think if you can get that priority right, then you're doing it right. Right. Like I think that is what the Lord calls us, and how the Lord calls us to live, in that way, if that makes sense. I can't remember how we got on the topic of I
asked if you loved what you do. So it's interesting. Yeah. I have quite a few military friends, and they, not for who's right and who's wrong. Obviously I agree with you, but not to cast judgment on anybody else, but that's not the priority. Like the military is the number one thing in their life. It is the goal. It is achievement. It is what's the next path that's going to get me the next place.
Right. High priority, high profile jobs.
It's the exact, exactly the career path. It's the exact opposite.
Which is what I wanted to do, right? Like if we go back and what I was talking about, like trying to do that congressional affairs job, leaving Miami, like I was going to geobatch for a year in DC and like, leave mayor in Miami because I wanted to chase this high profile job. And I was going to do like, congressional affairs, and then I was going to get CEO of another cutter, and then I'm going to be an admiral's aide, and like all these like high profile military jobs. That would all been for myself, right? Like trying to glorify myself and whatnot. And I have taken a path, or the Lord rather has led us in a path in the Coast Guard that has been less high profile, but more opportunities to, I guess, not like try to not focus on myself and to hopefully be able to focus on other people that are in the Coast Guard, and like what I was saying earlier, like seeing the Coast Guard as a mission field is kind of the mindset that we have. So, and then actually, so this next tour, we're getting ready to move again this summer. I think I was telling you guys a little bit about this maybe, but I'm actually going back to the Coast Guard Academy this summer. I don't know if I told you that yet.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
So I got picked up for a graduate school program with the Coast Guard. I'm going to go to the University of New Haven starting this summer.
UNH.
Yep, UNH. I'm going to get a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology.
Dude, what?
Yeah. So it's like
so you'll be living there?
So we're going to move to New London. We're going to try to buy a house in New London, commute for a year to New Haven, and then the follow-on tour is 3 years as a company officer at the Coast Guard Academy.
Okay.
So a company officer does like leadership and professional and military development and training stuff for the cadets. Yeah. So I'm going to be, kind of responsible for a company of probably about 100, 120 cadets or something like that, and have a lot of input and responsibility in their military training and leadership development stuff, nice. Which I am super stoked about, because a big part of Mayor's and mine's story at the academy was being involved in the Officers Christian Fellowship group or program. It's kind of like your Campus Crusade for Christ or other college ministry groups. That's the equivalent of what they have there, OCF. And we are really looking forward to getting involved in the ministry side of OCF with the cadets and mentoring and discipling cadets, and hopefully pouring into some of those kids' lives, just like people poured into our lives when we were there. My wife got saved at the academy from the lady who, the couple that was the OCF couple. They were, the head of OCF at the academy. She just like, Meredith was at some function in Swap Summer, and this lady, Betsy Touton, just like kind of met her and was like, hey, would you like to, meet during the school year? And she just started like witnessing to Meredith and pouring into her and discipling her. And that's how, Mary got saved and is where she's at today. Mm-hmm. In her walk with the Lord is through OCF. So all that to say, we're really excited about getting back there and hopefully getting involved in that ministry. It's going to be tough, like, with 3 little kids and all that. Like, we'll see, like, what the time commitment's like. Because the other thing I really want to do is I really want to coach football. So the guy that was my linebackers coach is the head coach now. And I already emailed him. I was like, hey, coach, like, we're coming back.
That was one of my questions. When you say that football was one of the best, was one of your favorite experience at college, like, that's, to me, like, I played football since I was 5. The last time I played football, I was 18. Mm-hmm. So for however many years, like, football was life. Yep. And like a lot of times you don't necessarily like it because it's like one of the harder sports. Practices generally aren't super fun.
Right.
So to hear you say that football at like a high level where it's even more grueling and serious, where the fun can easily get taken out of it, to hear you say it was your favorite experience still, that you love it that much.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, do you have coaching aspirations there?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I do. But
you must, like,
but
you
in
must
terms
love
of
it
like
that much. Priorities
though, like, man, I would like back to the, kind of circling back to the idolatry thing. Like, I would love to prioritize that. Right. Like I would love that. like I said earlier, come from a long line of kind of military family. I come from a long line of football coaches too, right? So same people. Yeah. My pop was the head coach at Kent State for a couple of years, recruited Nick Saban to play at Kent State. I don't know if you guys knew that. So Dave Puddington, my dad's dad, recruited Nick Saban to play at Kent State. Never actually coached him because he got fired the year that Saban was coming as a freshman, but he recruited him to go there.
Incredible.
And then my dad was obviously, high school football coach at Beaver River for a lot of years. The GOAT.
Just retired.
Maybe not the winningest coach, certainly not the winningest coach of all time. Maybe actually at Beaver River, he might have the most wins of any coach at Beaver River just because he was there the longest. I'm not really sure. Actually,
longevity matters.
Matt Leidecker's done really well lately. He might actually have that already because he's been the head coach for a number of years now, and they've done really good.
That's right. Your dad was assistant coach.
Fairly consistent.
He was an assistant coach for a while, and then he was the head coach for a while.
Yeah.
And then just recently, he was assistant coach again when Matt was has been the head coach. Yeah. And Dad was just like the lineman coach, and that was more of like
just to be there.
Moral support. Yeah. Doing too much coaching, he's just kind of getting to stand on the sideline and still be with the kids and stuff like that. But not as, I think he's enjoyed that more. The head coaching job, I think for Dad was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll probably listen to this. Nothing against my dad, but he maybe wasn't the best play caller and stuff, like as Nickel probably. But we're not going to get into that. And I've had to multiple times I've had to forgive my dad.
Don't worry, we're going to have him on. Hopefully, he'll come on soon. He'll say the
multiple
opposite.
Times in the last couple of years,
the right calls. My players just wouldn't execute them.
Yeah. I still hold grudges against my dad for a lot of things that I've tried to forgive him for over the years. The 2-point conversion play call against Dolgeville, the quarterfinal of our senior year.
What would have been a better option there? Kicking it? You think going for 2 is the right option?
I think going for 2 is the right choice. Not that I don't trust your leg and stuff like that, or didn't trust your leg. But to rehash this, I think we should have just done super run right. Just run into the line instead of super special run left.
Try to do some trickery.
I got annihilated. Yeah. Just put it in the lineman's hand and the blockers and try.
We had run that. That formation had been run most of the game.
The other thing which would have been better would have been some kind of 2-point play that we had planned and saved for your 2-point conversion that you got.
I don't think that we should have ran out of that formation at all.
Super run right, start running that way. You leak out to the flat, and you're standing by yourself in the end zone. Right. That would have been the right play call.
The entire team blitzed for context.
Yeah, that was.
They knew exactly what was coming.
Super special run left, and Dad was super flustered because he was trying to draw. He was trying to get us to draw them off sides, and we didn't know what he was doing. So then Dad came out. He's like, "You guys are idiots." He didn't say that, but he's like, and I was trying to draw them off sides. All right, super special run left, and we're like, line up, and then there's
whole team
there's 3 linebackers standing right there, and I'm about to get the ball with Evan Leidecker and Isaiah Riccio to my left, being the only guy.
Play, right?
And Nick,
it's like a weak side counter, right?
It was a weak side, but you got a couple of running backs blocking for you. So it was like Nick, Isaiah, and Evan Leidecker about to try to block for me against the whole defense, and I just got annihilated. And anyways, sorry, Dad. I forgive you. It doesn't. It's whatever, man.
It's so funny because you're like, it still hurts. Things you hold against your dad is like a call at a football game.
Well, it wouldn't have hurt. It wouldn't have been
like something way more serious.
It wouldn't have been so bad if we could have gotten annihilated that game. They were the way better team. Remember how they came out, they hit harder, they were bigger.
We dug back,
we came back and then
they were up 20-0, and then we scored 3 straight.
That game was hopeless most of the game. Is the real reason why it hurt so bad.
Yeah.
We came back, we clawed back, and still lost.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, well, it's good that you have that passion that you might be able to then use
that's really cool.
In the future to coach.
But that's the other thing is you're talking about OCF and coaching, in terms of mission fields, right? Like the academy doing OCF would be a great mission field. The football team, as a coach in the football team, would be a great mission field. Yeah. So man, what do I want to, I'm going to have limited time and unlimited aspirations of what I could, spend my time with. I still got to spend time with my kids and my wife, right? And doing all that stuff when I'm there. But man, I would love to be able to pour into OCF, be able to pour into coaching football, pour into those kids the way that people poured into me when I was there. It is so valuable. Is
the football environment there where something where you could have your boys around, or is it pretty buttoned up?
Potentially, yeah. Cool. Potentially. I know people have in the past, and if that's what it took to be able to, be involved, I think that Coach Grant would be okay with that. I haven't talked to him about that. But I think that there would be room to be able to have, like Eli and Caleb around, and they would love that. When my dad was a football coach and a track coach growing up, like I always went to practices with my dad, and that was kind of fun.
That's cool.
So yeah,
dude, I'm excited about you being in Connecticut again.
I know, dude. We're gonna be 5 hours away. Like we're gonna be so close
to here. Yeah, but I'm in Connecticut all the time, man.
Yeah,
I'm in New Haven all the time. Like I stay in New Haven.
Sweet. So that's the other thing about being in the Coast Guard that's been cool that other people don't necessarily get to have the experience with. Like, I'm in California and running into people like Elliot when he was doing his motorcycle trip.
Yeah.
He didn't mention that he visited me in California on the podcast, but Elliot stopped on his motorcycle trip and visited me when I was in California for like a couple of days. So that was super cool getting to see him out there. Yeah. When we were in Miami, Pat would come and do his recurrent like his currency stuff for a flight instructor in West Palm Beach. So every time Pat was in South Florida, we would get together. Like I saw Pat probably 4 or 5 times when we were in Miami. Over the 5 years we were in Miami, I saw Pat 4 or 5 times in South Florida. We get together and either get dinner, go for a quick hike in one of the swamps or something like that, just get to see some different stuff and just get to catch up with Pat, so like wherever we've been, like we've been able to run into people that we've known, from the Coast Guard, from our time at the Coast Guard Academy, friends from growing up and stuff like that. But that's been so special. And I'm really, really excited to be so close again because we'll have such easy access to get back up here for Thanksgiving. And plus, it won't be a cutter schedule. It'll be, the Academy schedule.
Yeah.
So, like,
administrative a little
every Thanksgiving, right? Like, we can come up here for at least 5 days and hang out for Thanksgiving. We'll see what we do for Christmas. Usually we do that with Mayor's parents and stuff like that. But, like, we'll be able to get up here so much more than what we have recently and, get the kids around.
Some late season hunting and
stuff and whatnot. Yeah, maybe late season up here, Thanksgiving with a rifle and whatnot. So yeah, we'll see. Stuff like that.
So from your experience, you've been a leader since you were a captain in high school football, even in your friend group in a lot of ways, but then into your professional career, like a leader. Yeah. And you might not think that translates to expertise, but I certainly think it does, especially if you can do it at a high level and do it well.
Right.
So there must be something there.
Yeah.
When lives are at stake.
When it matters the most.
Yeah. Let me caveat before we start talking about leadership. I am not an expert in leadership. I've got a decent amount of experience in it, right? Just by the nature of my job, I'm not an expert in it, right? Yeah. Like I've tried to read a lot of books, done a lot of classes, but I'm not an expert. Well, anything that I'll say isn't like super academically, like maybe grounded or rigorous or something like that. But I can talk like experiences and ideas and stuff like that.
So from your experience, do you feel like there was like other leaders in your life that kind of you fed off somewhat? Because not everybody's a leader. We know that.
Right. Yeah. You mean like mentors or like role models and stuff like that? Or
yeah. I
mean, I can think of a lot of people that have influenced me and like taught me things. Obviously my dad is probably one of the biggest ones in terms of just like influencing my mannerisms and my, the way that I think about life and stuff like that. And being a coach and a teacher and stuff like that. So my dad definitely. Some other folks that have really been influential. Hank Teuton, so the lady who I said led Married to the Lord, Betsy. Yep, Hank and Betsy. So they were the OCF couple when we were at the academy. Betsy actually passed away from cancer when we were juniors at the academy, which is really sad. Wow. But we stayed close with Hank over the years. Haven't gotten to talk to him a lot over the last couple of years because he's doing a lot of different things. Obviously, our lives have gotten busy. But he officiated our wedding. You guys might remember Hank is the guy who officiated our wedding. So he was a big influence during the time that we were at OCF. Another guy that I talk to a lot now, I've tried to, especially since I've been on like the paternity leave, trying to be more consistent with meeting with him via like Zoom. His name is Larry Simpson. Larry's a retired colonel, a retired Air Force colonel who now works for OCF. So OCF, Officers Christian Fellowship, is a bigger organization that does ministry to military families. And they have a chapter at the Coast Guard Academy, which is the ministry that hopefully we'll be able to get involved with. Larry does OCF ministry in the Pacific Northwest and is responsible for doing OCF ministry stuff like the state of Washington, the greater Seattle area. But then he also hits like California, Alaska, Guam, Japan. Like he does OCF stuff in all those places, kind of in like the Pacific Northwest region, right? Like of the world. How did we even meet Larry? So we met him and his wife Bobby and Larry. Sounds like Bob and Larry, right? From but Bobby is from VeggieTales. Yep. So Bobby is his wife, and then Larry. So Meredith got connected with them somehow when she was stationed in Seattle on the Polar Star on the big icebreaker there, and I got to know Larry, and somehow we just clicked. And he's been an awesome mentor for me over the years. He actually was at our wedding as well. It's kind of funny. We're talking about our wedding, mine and Mary's wedding, an awful lot. But
funny, real quick. One more thing about your wedding.
Yeah,
I drove right from your wedding to my first date
with Stephanie. Mm-hmm. No way.
Yeah, it's the same day.
Really?
I drove 8 hours or whatever it was from there back to Connecticut and went to dinner that night, first time.
That's awesome. So you were at the reception.
Yeah, I was. Well, yeah, the reception wasn't too late.
It was late.
Maybe we stayed over that night, and then the next day I drove.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yep.
I hear that reception. Well, the reception was fun. The after party I hear was wild. Which we obviously weren't at the after party. We were having our own after party.
Yeah, roger that.
But yeah,
10-4.
But I heard that the after party was wild at Brett and Paula's house. I don't know if you guys were there or not.
I don't think. Did you go to that? No.
I think we went.
The reception was fun.
I was married at that point, so
the Best Western. Yeah.
And you brought Levi.
Oh yeah, that's right, man.
Where were we going with that wedding? Bobby and Larry. Yeah, so Bobby and Larry did the cord of three strands thing. So they did our marriage counseling with us before we got married, and then they did our cord of three strands at our wedding. And then I've talked to Larry over the last several years. He's been a major mentor for me. Just a solid guy, and somebody that I aspire to be like in terms of his walk and his ministry and everything. Let's see, who's some other role models and mentors. I mean, I guess like if you want to like talk about like academically, like people I've read about and whatnot, like George Washington was an absolutely incredible guy. Kind of depending on who you talk to or what you read, he was a super devout Christian, or he actually wasn't. He was just like, kind of just, culturally religious like everyone else at the time.
What's the truth?
I don't know. I like to think that he was a pretty squared away guy. I mean, he certainly seems to have been, based on everything that I've read and what I've studied about him. So he would be like a historical figure that I probably would say my favorite historical figure,
especially regarding leadership.
Yeah,
that's what my father-in-law said on his episode. Big George Washington fan.
Yeah.
First president. I know you didn't know that.
Nice, Nick.
There you go. Let's see. There's a couple other guys that are active duty now that I kind of keep in touch with a little bit. Commander Justin Vanden Heuvel is actually, so my coffee mug, ad nautis per nautis.
That sounds so cool.
Which is by sailors for sailors. It's the Coast Guard Command Cadre School at the Coast Guard Academy. It's part of the Leadership Development Center. He's the chief there now at the for the Coast Guard Command Cadre Afloat School. He was a warrant officer, so ton of Coast Guard experience. He's got 30 plus years in the Coast Guard now. Yep. But he was a warrant officer when we were at the Coast Guard Academy. He was stationed there at the Chief Warrant Officer Professional Development School. So he and his wife were involved in OCF there. When I was in California, he was the CO on the 225-foot buoy tender that was in Buena Vista Island, which is right in the San Francisco Bay. So we got to meet up with them, and he and his wife also were kind of mentors for Mary and I, like during the time that we were dating and getting married. And then I've gone to his class at the Coast Guard Command Cadre School when I was getting ready to come and do this executive officer ride, which is what I'm on right now. I got to go and sit with him for 2 weeks worth of classes, and he's just an absolutely stellar, like, you want to talk about a guy who is the most like just devout, all in for Christ Christian guy that is also just like, my goodness, just the most competent Coast Guard officer and competent Coast Guardsman. I mean, he's got the experience, right? Like 30 plus years, but he knows there is nothing the guy doesn't know about the Coast Guard. So you want to talk about a guy that is able to be a light and minister through the diligence of his work and be a light for Christ, like through how good he is at his job. Like, he didn't get picked up for a captain for 06 because he doesn't have a bachelor's degree. So he's one of the few that was able to actually like become an officer without a bachelor's degree because he did, he had like so many credits or whatever, but he was able to get up to 05. So he's an 05 without even a 4-year degree. He doesn't have a master's degree either, but he got passed over for captain because, he probably doesn't have the piece of paper.
Right.
I think it's why he got passed over for 06. That's my impression. Coast Guard's a loss. Hands down, Coast Guard's lost, right? Like he's gonna retire this summer or maybe next summer. I think it's this summer that he's retiring. Absolutely, the Coast Guard's lost and not making that guy an 06 and giving him a national security cutter as a CEO because he is just one of the most incredible Coast Guard guys that I know. And one of the most incredible Christian men that I know. So in terms of like influence and someone to aspire to be like, he's the guy to Commander Justin Van Hoovel. So yeah.
Moving to your, do you have like a leadership philosophy generally speaking?
Yeah.
Or is there something that you've learned from your time leading men and women that you could expound on a little?
Yeah, definitely. So there's lots of leadership theories and philosophies, right? There's lots of different ways that, people have written about it. So many books, obviously. And lots of different kind of theories. One of the things that I learned about at a school that I did was called the Leadership Challenge. And they have like kind of 5 steps or 5 things that a leader has to do. It's model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, and enable others to act and encourage the heart. So MICEE, MICEE is the way that you remember that. So that's a great model to just like kind of think about. And I would encourage you to read the book, the Leadership Challenge. It's a really good book and something good to learn about. So that's been something that I've kind of tried to latch onto a little bit, but more so is this idea of servant leadership, right? Like I tell the guys this whenever I do check-in meetings with guys that are reporting newly to the boat. I'm the XO on board now. I'm not the CO, so I'm not the primary shot caller. My job as the XO is to make sure that everything runs as smooth as possible. And so what I tell the guys is my job is to make sure that you're taken care of, which means that your family is also taken care of, right? Like my job is to try to make sure everything runs smooth so that you're ready to do the job that we're entrusted with and that we're charged with by the American people, to keep the waterways open and safe for commerce, for recreation, all that kind of stuff. So this idea of servant leadership is really probably the biggest one that I've tried to latch onto, and the idea of service, like the purpose of what we do in the Coast Guard. And this has been lost. We were talking earlier a little bit about generational stuff. This has been lost on the current generation of service members, is the fact that, like, hello, the word is service. You're in the service. You're not there for yourself. You are there to serve the country. Like, the primary role of what you're doing is you're making some kind of sacrifice for the good of other people, for the good of what the country needs you to do. That's why it's called the service. Mm-hmm. So when you hear so many people complain about, like, the benefits not being enough, having to move so much, the pay not being good enough, I make way more money for the amount of work that I do than I should than someone does in the private sector. I will say that right here. And please don't edit that out. That's an example of, like, again, government inefficiency. I make way more money than I should for, like, the amount of work that I do. Like, I try to put effort in, work time, all that kind of stuff. But people complain about that kind of stuff is my point. Right. And they're losing we've lost the mindset of a service mindset on, like, the kind of the newer generation, I think. Mm-hmm. And just like the people that are, joining the service and stuff like that in our country. So one of the biggest things that I've kind of, especially in these last 2 years, tried to hang on to for my leadership kind of inspiration. There's this thing, it's called the Coast Guardsman's Creed. And we had to memorize this. This is one of the indoctrination things we had to memorize when we were in SWAB summer. Sadly, it's not taught anymore in boot camp or the Coast Guard Academy. And do you know why it's not taught anymore? At least this is my idea, and I'm 99% sure it's right. Is because the last line of the Coast Guardsman's Creed says that with God's help, I shall endeavor to be one of his noblest works, the United States Coast Guardsman. Right. The fact that it says God in there is not acceptable to, the modern kind of the modern mindset. Like anything that says God in it. Like we're not going to teach it anymore, which is just absurd. But give me 1 second. So, servant leadership. The Coast Guardsman Creed says that I'm a Coast Guardsman. I revere that long line of expert seamen who, by their devotion to duty and sacrifice of self being the key term there, devotion to duty and sacrifice of self, have made it possible for me to be a member of a service honored and respected in peace and war throughout the world. Do you have it pulled up right now? Mm-hmm. I never by word or deed will, great, now that you're looking at, I never by word or deed will bring reproach upon the fair name of my service, nor permit others to do so unchallenged. I will cheerfully and willfully obey all lawful orders.
I'll always be on
time to relieve.
And shall endeavor to do more
rather than less than my share.
This is like firing me up right here.
What's the next line? Let's see how far I can go. Well, it doesn't matter. I used to have it memorized. I've got parts of it memorized. I shall endeavor to be a model citizen in the community in which I live. So far as I am able to bring to my seniors solutions, not problems. It goes through all this stuff, right? That's like kind of a.
I shall sell self.
I shall sell life dearly to an enemy of my, or I shall sell life dearly to an enemy of my country, but give it freely to rescue those in peril or those in need or something like that, right?
Nick's about to run through a wall.
But it's not taught anymore, right?
No kidding.
And it needs to be. There's stuff that's like kind of like it that's taught, but it's all watered down. It's all woke now, man. It's just it's terrible. And
because I'm gonna go join the Coast Guard.
That last line was pretty hard.
The last line, being that with God's help, I shall endeavor to be one of His noblest works, United States Coast Guardsman. Like I have that as the background of my computer. Now, it sounds super corny. Everyone's gonna think like
Hardo.
Yeah, Hardo. Yeah, that's the background on my Coast Guard computer. I have it printed out, and it's over my desk right now. I'll probably get it framed at some point. Honestly, maybe I'll get that framed and put up in my office at the academy. Would be a great thing to have and a great thing to remind cadets of. Like the first line of that, man, I am a Coast Guardsman. I revere that long line of expert seamen who, by their devotion to duty and sacrifice of self, have made it possible for me to be a member of a service honored, respected, in peace and war throughout the world. The idea of devotion to duty and sacrifice of self, that's completely lost, right? Like sacrifice of self. Nobody wants to do that anymore. They want to get as much money as you possibly can, all the benefits. Oh, like I'm in the Coast Guard. You're not giving me enough to do this service thing.
Yeah.
You do not have a service mindset. That's one of the biggest things that I want to try to pour into the cadets that, I'm going to be like training and stuff like that, is this idea of like, you are here to serve other people. You are not here for yourself. The Coast Guard is going to take care of you, right? Like you're going to get a lot of money. You're going to get a lot of benefits. You're going to have to move a little bit, and that sucks. That sucks with your family. And I'm not a big fan of that. I think a lot of the times I was talking about, wanting to get out of the Coast Guard to do other things. Like I've thrown that idea around so much because the only thing that I knew growing up, I grew up in Lewis County, same school, K through 12, small town. Some of my best friends, still friends with you guys. I've known Brock since I was 4 years old or whatever. Like I would love my kids to have that experience, but that's just not what the Lord has called us to.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of dawned on me in the last couple of months here as I've, kind of accepted the orders already for this grad school and then the academy thing. I'm going to be 20 years in the Coast Guard. So we're going to bounce around until Eli's 15 at least. Right. Mm-hmm. So he's not going to have the childhood that I had. Right. But that's okay. There's a lot of families that do that.
Are you okay with that?
Not really. I'm working on being okay with it, right? And that's going to be a challenge. It's definitely going to be a challenge. But I think it'll be good. I'd love to get the kids kind of connected back here a little bit, especially during the summer times, to get together with your guys' kids and stuff like that.
Go to the fair.
Go to the fair. Yeah. But with Elliot's kids and whatnot, Elliot and I have already talked about this. When Eli's getting older, to be 12 and stuff like that. I want to come back here. I want to try to be consistent, come back here for youth turkey weekend or whatever. And get out on the Martin's farm with Elliot and Ollie or something like that. Dude. And, and so that, Eli can try to connect with Ollie and some other guys and stuff like that are consistent consistent friends, like maybe they won't see each other very often, but that can be kind of a consistent source of friendship and stuff like that. And like other kids that I know that are, being raised in godly homes. Another one is like probably my best friend. I would say he's just been my most consistent best friend over the last 9 years. His name is Townsend Hurst. He's a Coast Guard pilot. He flies MH-60 Jayhawks for the Coast Guard. He's an instructor right now at Aviation Training Center in Petaluma.
Those like the guys flying rescue swimmers?
Mobile. Rescue swimmers go on both the 60s and 65s. And he's had some cool, like when he's doing operational pilot stuff, he's had some really cool rescues. But anyway, so Townsend, he's got a son that's like right around Eli's age too. And we try to do like annual vacations with them. So like hopefully Eli and Caleb will have some kind of consistent friendship and godly friends that they're growing up with in that regard. But it's definitely gonna be a challenge bouncing around so much. But this is what the Lord has called us to. And I'm realizing that now, right? Like it's gonna make sense when by the time I'm up with these or finished with this next commitment, it'll be at 13 years. It doesn't make sense to bounce at that point. Like if we get to 20, we'll get, the health insurance for life. We'll start getting a pension and stuff like that. Like I can retire at 20 years and I'll do some other job, or we'll get into some other ministry or something like that. Yep. But it's looking like the Coast Guard's going to be it for 20 years. And like I'll say it again, like it's the mission field, right? Like that's the mission field that God has called us to. And that's the way that Mary and I kind of want to think about that. And the servant leadership stuff, I think, goes a lot into that. Like the purpose of my job isn't to be there for myself. It's to serve the guys and the girls that I work with and that work for me. They don't work for me. They work for the American people, right? Yeah, like I'm a supervisor and a leader of those people, but my job is to facilitate their well-being and their competence and training and their ability to do their jobs in service of their country. Yeah. And the most important aspect of that, when you get back to somebody asked about leadership philosophy, one of the tenets of my command philosophy when I was a CO in the 87, so I had like 3 words, every leader has like, three words, like, that they are their buzzwords or whatever. Mine were, I did them all as P's. Somehow I just ended up like that.
Because your name is Paul Puddington.
Paul Puddington, yeah. So it was people, purpose, and pride. But like people being the first tenet of that command philosophy. I would probably change it if I get command again, just based on other experiences and stuff like that. But people is, from a Christian standpoint, from a Christ-centered worldview, people are all that matters, right? Like people are the only people, or are the only things with souls and that will last for eternity, right? So like service to people, taking care of people, pouring into people's lives and hearts, and into their souls, like that's the only thing that matters, man. And that's got to be just at the forefront of your mind every day, and everything that you do is the fact that there's a soul behind that person that is, either, working under you or working beside you, or that you're working for, right? Like, my CEO right now, he probably won't listen to this. I don't think, but he's, I don't think that he's, walking with the Lord. And I really want him to be, right? Like I want to somehow just be able to witness to him so that, and I try to pray for him as much as I think to, that the Lord would just get a hold of his heart and, and bring him to himself. And that's all that really matters. Like that's, at the end of the day, keeping the waterways open so that, commerce can flow and, the U.S. can prosper and we can get more money. Like all that's doing is distracting us more and more from God, from Jesus. Right. And the fact that all this is going to go away, man, the world and its desires will pass away, but the man who does the will of God, right? Like that's what lasts forever. I just completely botched that. First
pretty good to me.
Yes.
I wouldn't have known that. Pretty great.
The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God, like that's what lasts forever. It's in 1 John. It's gets quoted by Brad Pitt in Fury too.
I never actually seen that all the way through.
It's a pretty good movie.
Pretty good.
I think I've only watched it once or twice, but I remember
I've seen the clip where he's like the send me part, with Shia LaBeouf.
Shia LaBeouf, maybe. Yeah, I know
he's like, he quotes the thing. He's like, send me.
Yeah.
It's like,
this is it's that military movie.
Yeah. Heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
The tank movie.
Yep.
Yeah. Dang, dude, that's super inspiring and enlightening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You went on like
I think
one of your next tenants, if you're ever CEO, that was amazing. Service.
Yeah. That's actually one of the things I was really excited about coming and talking to you guys is I feel like I didn't even plan on getting into leadership stuff. And if there's other stuff you guys want to, like I said, I got some time today. I'm on vacation right now, visiting mom and dad. If there's other stuff you guys want to talk about, but the thing that I was really excited about coming and talking to you guys about is that talking about these kind of things helps you process priorities and like where your mind's actually at with things. So like, I think I've thought a lot of those things about leadership and maybe I haven't verbalized them or kind of like put them into words as much as maybe would be good. But, talking about it with other people, hopefully kind of brings out and it makes it more real for myself, like my passion for that, like, making Christ known through what I'm doing, trying to instill in these young people that are coming to the Coast Guard, this sense of service and service above self and sacrifice of self and stuff like that. That's just been lost. We are, the purpose of the Coast Guard is not, again, to use the term, it's not a self-licking ice cream cone, and it's gotten to be that way. The government has gotten to be a self-licking ice cream cone. It's got to be for the people that we're serving. That's what the Coast Guard, the whole purpose of the Coast Guard is to do that, and that mindset has been lost. So I think that needs to be focused on and reinstilled in people. And the other thing is, huge issue for the Coast Guard and the other services the last several years has been recruitment and retention, right? Like people are just like the rate turnover of folks getting out is just it's absurd, and that's one of the reasons why I guess maybe I won't say that. It's just been a struggle for all the services, is recruiting and retention, and a big aspect of that is like the Coast Guard and the other services are focusing so much on the extrinsic motivation for you to be in the service, the benefits. We'll try to keep you, try to keep you geographically stable for 7 years, 10 years. Like that is unheard of in the Coast Guard or the military of, 10 years ago, like being geographically stable for 7-10 years or whatever. But they're like bending over backwards to try to make like all this extrinsic motivation bonuses, like to stay in, to do certain jobs, opportunities. A lot of it is monetary and geographic stability. Yeah. I mean, in education stuff, like the benefits are just absurd to be in the Coast Guard. Like the amount of free stuff that you get, and the pay and the benefits, it's absurd. And the fact that there's such a big turnover rate, I think, is because the intrinsic side, the intrinsic motivation of being in a job that it's taxing, right? Like it's hard moving around and stuff like that. But the Coast Guard is so much focused on the extrinsic motivation, monetary benefits, geographic stability, and they're losing that idea of like
this creed,
the bigger purpose, the creed. It's lost.
Yeah.
The idea of a service mindset, which is what, like, that's what's keeping me around, I think, and the people, like I said, right? But like this service mindset, and I think that the Coast Guard needs to put some serious thought into how are we
getting back to their roots?
Yeah, how are we getting back to our roots? How are we intrinsically motivating our people to want to serve and get back to this, this Coast Guard core values of honor, respect, devotion to duty. Like devotion to duty is an intrinsic thing, right?
Yeah,
like it's got to come from inside
your values and fabric.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the bigger question would be whose feet does that core problem lay at the feet of? Is it cultural? Is it parental? Like, because a lot of people who are going into the services anyways have that sense of duty for the most part, that are actually there for the right reasons, let's say.
It's getting less and less that way, though, I think.
Right. And so how do we combat that at a bigger level? Messages like this?
Yeah, I don't know. Man, that's
a heavy question. That's a big one.
There's so many ways you could go with that, right? Like the nuclear family.
Oh, yeah. We're canceled. Thanks. Awesome. It was great having this podcast for 40
Yeah. So from like a fundamental and like a societal standpoint, it's the responsibility of parents to raise kids, all that kind of stuff. But the Coast Guard has no control over that. They have control over the people that are coming into the service.
based on interviews, resumes, whatever the case is, whatever it is that recruiters look at, skill sets and stuff like that. But the only place, or the first place that the Coast Guard gets to then start reshaping those people is at those accession points, right? Boot camp for enlisted folks, the academy, officer candidate school, or direct commissions for, whatever other commissioning avenues for officers. And that's like the first point where, the Coast Guard gets to start having the influence on that. And I think that it needs to start getting hammered at boot camp. It needs to start getting hammered at the academy. And maybe it still does get hammered. Like, I think they hammered it pretty hard when I was there. But the problem is there's so much other stuff going on, right? Like the academic rigor, you got sports, you got like all this stuff, like I said, drinking through a fire hose. And it's hard to retain a lot of the leadership, kind of more philosophical stuff that they're trying to ingrain in you up front. But I think it needs to continue to be talked about. And it's just like, the other thing is individual leaders, right? Like, I think we need individual leaders that are leading crews and units and stuff like that are more focused on instilling a service mindset and, in the crews and stuff like that too. And that would go with, there's far-reaching applications for that mindset too, that leadership, beyond just the Coast Guard and leadership and, the government or service or whatever. There's business implications for that and all that kind of stuff too, obviously. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Like, have conversations, deal with what you can in your own home. How do we combat some of that stuff with some counter popular culture, I guess?
Yeah. Yep.
But you're right. I mean, it's everywhere in these kinds of fields. Law enforcement, same problem.
Yeah.
Like
right. You were talking about that, like new kids coming into the academy and stuff like that. Right. Like,
but it's not about
entitlement, or
it's not
whatever.
a sense of duty. It's not a sense of
service or anything.
Service. We talked about sense of duty with Sean Harney a couple episodes ago, and then two with Wilbur Zara with the State Department, and. Like, it's just
I haven't listened to Wilbur's yet. I'm excited about that.
As you were talking, especially about moving around, I'm like, wait till you get to that one, because he's like, a time such as this is where I'm supposed to be. Yes. And I'm going to do this. And like, you're gonna love that.
Esther. Yep.
But I mean, Nick, you got what else? You got anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we could be here for 12 hours. So
no question.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Love to talk about parenting at some point. I don't need to get into that right now, but at some point we talk parenting. It doesn't need to be now, though.
100%.
Yeah. Would you
change it?
Well, yeah. Would you come back?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would. If you guys wanted me to. Yeah. I'll be 5 hours away in the summer. So if you guys keep this going for a while, I would love to come back. Okay. There's a lot of other things that I would like to, or like I said, it's helpful to like process and whatnot for things. So, we talked a lot about the Coast Guard. Didn't talk a lot about family.
Yeah, but
that's all right.
That's good.
Awesome. So, what makes up a man? It's a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about for the last couple hours. The sense of duty, the sense of purpose, what it means to lead others, what it means to lead your home. Like this. This is stuff we could talk about for
humility.
Hours and hours.
Yep.
And I think
humility. There's a
big infusion of humility. Yeah. I think it's kind of what you're getting at, right? Yeah, like that sense of duty is the military way of putting it.
Right.
Humans need at a human level, like we need humility to do that.
Yes.
And I don't see a ton of humility out there.
Yeah. I think humility is something we all struggle with, right? Like we all want to think of ourselves more highly than we ought. But it's definitely something that I struggle with. It's something that I try to pray for. It sounds really prideful to tell everyone that I try to pray for humility. I'm like a Pharisee here saying, Lord, make me humble. Thank you that I'm not like this other guy over here that's super prideful. But it's relatable. I need it, man. I need it so bad.
Sure. Well, I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time.
Thanks
for
hanging
out with us.
Yeah, you don't get much time, so thank you for spending it.
This has been
a couple hours with us.
Like I said, I've been looking forward to this for the last 3 months.
We've been looking forward to it since we started this.
Yeah.
Literally.
So I mean, if you guys wanted to have me back at some point, I would love to come back.
Absolutely. And you just let us know when you're back, and we'll have you on. Of course, all this stuff, parenting, masculinity, all these kinds of hot button issues we love talking about, and conversations are important for that. So
cool.
But,
sounds good.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you, everybody.